Aye, so 2019, is that the year you won UK's Strongest Man?
Yes, 2019 was the year, yeah.
That was Ultimate Strongman.
It was, yeah.
Because I seen you then, and I remember thinking you were probably the biggest guy I'd ever met in my life. Like, huge. Was it? You said how heavy were you then?
UK's that year. I wasn't. I don't think I was 140 that year.
140 kilo.
I don't think I was quite 140 that year. No, I don't think I quite made it. I'd generally I start off around 140, but by the time the 8 to 10 weeks of training for UK's, I generally drop a little bit of weight.
Oh, you drop weight?
Yeah,
for it?
yeah. That was the biggest thing. I could never balance the food.
Is it not an advantage to be as heavy as possible?
Oh, definitely. Yeah.
Okay.
100%. Yeah.
Oh, so you wanted to be as heavy as possible?
Yeah,
but
I was trying. I was trying.
Have you always been big? Like, have you always been a big guy?
Yeah. Yeah. As soon as I left school, I was just 6 foot at like 16.
Right.
But then by the time I got to 19, I was like 6'6".
Wow.
Yeah, so I was a big guy.
Going into first year in school, were you bigger than the rest of the kids at that point, or?
I think it was a little bit bigger, but it was more like I was a bit chunkier at school because I didn't quite have any height on me. So I was always, definitely during my whole teenage years, I was definitely like overweight for sure.
Oh, were you?
Oh yeah, big time.
Is that something that made you want to get into strongman?
Well, no. That wasn't never really the motivation. No.
So what was your first memory of strongman?
So definitely when I was a teenager, watching a man called Chris Gearan on TV. He was on Channel 5 competing in UK's Strongest Man, and I just remember him doing, I think it was the axle overhead press,
right?
And I think it was called the Apollin's axle or the Daddy's axle or something like that, and it just looked super cool.
And did you go to events?
No. It was it's something you see at Christmas time. You know, I was just the same as everyone else. You've seen it at Christmas time. At that time, with Chris Gearan, I don't know what happened there. Just scrolling through the channels and I come across it. But strongman for me was always just something you seen at Christmas time. I didn't know too much about it. You know what I mean?
So that's your first memory. Where did you then start in the sport?
Well, I started competing in strongman 2014, but I was never a sort of fitness person, so I would say strongman was my sort of journey down fitness. You know what I mean?
Was there somebody that you knew, that like a family member or a friend, that introduced you to it? Like said, "Hey, Paul, do you want to sign up to this?" Or
no,
you just saw it and thought, "I'm going to sign up."
To be fair, strongman started for me, but before it started in strength, it sort of started in the Tough Mudder that I did in 2013, and lost a little bit of weight trying to get in shape for that. And I'd ended up going round Tough Mudder at like 16 stone. But just after Tough Mudder, I decided, because I was 16 stone at this point, and I still didn't like the way I looked. So I decided at that point I needed to try and put on a little bit of muscle and try and get bigger. And I remember a specific conversation on the way home from Tough Mudder with a friend of mine in the car journey home, and he goes, "What? So what are you going to get up to now?" And I just remember saying, "I'm going to get bigger." Right. And I wanted to go down the route of strength. Bodybuilding didn't have any appeal to me. I didn't like looking a certain way, but not being able to function a certain way. So I decided to go down and like do some lifting, strength wise. Squatting, deadlifting, and that's what led me to strongman.
Okay. Because Tough Mudder, by the way, I can't imagine carrying weight in Tough Mudder's advantageous.
Definitely no.
Just for the listeners, because not everybody will know what Tough Mudder is, could you just explain what that is?
Yeah, so it's quite a popular sort of run. It's a bit of like a cross-country half marathon obstacle course. You know, there's a bunch of different obstacles around the course, and yeah, I'd never done any running in my life. I'd never done any sort of fitness, nothing. I played a little bit of rugby at school for 5 minutes, but that was about it.
So this is the first event you
With the start of the year, a friend approached me in the gym and we decided to do it for a charity. So I just got in training and just, we'll get signed up and we'll go and give it a go.
Good on you.
So yeah, a bunch of us went down and went round it, and I did all right actually. I did it in like 2 hours and 35 minutes or something. So I
What's the
did all right.
distance?
It's like it's a half marathon, so like 12 miles.
That's pretty good.
I think I did all right.
When there's obstacles involved as well in mud.
Oh yeah, it was. Oh, there's loads of different stuff. There's big high walls. You've got to go under.
Or climbing and
There's climbing. You've got. I think the worst one. I still remember the name of it is called Arctic Enema. And I think anyone that's went round Tough Mudder will know what that is.
is this you jump into cold water?
Yeah, it's pretty much just a tank full of ice and a little bit of water, and you've got to. There's a board that you can't get over. It's got barbed wire around it, so you've got to go under. And as I went under, I clipped my head off the board, but because it was so cold, I didn't feel it. And it was about half a mile down the road, and one of the boys that was running with, he's like, "Paul, your face is covered in blood." I was just numb, so I didn't feel it. It was funny.
Oh my goodness. Yeah. So that's an endurance event.
Yeah.
And you concluded after that, I need to get bigger.
Yeah.
So, and then
I still wasn't really in good shape, you know. I made it round Tough Mudder, but again, I lost a bunch of weight that year just to get round Tough Mudder. I think I came from like 19.5 stone. And went round at about 16 stone, and I dropped all that weight, and I still looked crap.
Yeah. Because how tall are you, Paul?
At that point, I was 6'6".
And it's that 16 stone must be pretty close to the bottom of your BMI, is it?
I've got no idea what that is.
Well, like body mass index.
Yeah,
like
I know what the BMI
be,
is, but I don't know what the numbers on are. I've never really paid attention to it because I don't believe in that.
Must have been lean for you though. That.
Yeah, it was down a lot, but again, I didn't look very good.
You said you don't believe in BMI because BMI is such it's so outrageous for a strongman or a bodybuilder, isn't it?
And if I'm honest, it's just outraging even for a working man.
Right.
In my opinion, like I'm from a family where my father worked all his life. Like BMI doesn't mean someone that's working, that gets up in the morning and working with their hands and working on tools all day. That BMI means nothing. Like them men have got to eat.
Yeah, for sure.
Know? And it's Scotland, so it's cold. You know what I mean? So you've got to, you can't just be the thin guy, you know what I mean? Or you'll freeze.
What did your dad do?
He was a joiner ever since he was left school.
Hard working, and your body composition when you're doing a physical job isn't going to be the same as somebody's body composition who's sitting in an office.
It's totally different. And I get even how the BMI might apply to someone in the office, but I still don't. It's just it's too wide a scale. You know what I mean? It all just comes down to like what your output levels are really.
I dropped below. This is the reason I ask. I dropped below my BMI once, and I was training very, very hard. It was the fittest I'd ever been. But according to the BMI, I was unhealthy. You know, I certainly didn't feel unhealthy. I was running up the stairs 3 at a time. You know, so it's
I'm actually getting a bit of a flashback to. I think actually, come to think of it, that we're talking about this BMI. I remember having a conversation. I'm pretty sure a doctor told me, even though it is 16 stone, I was still supposed to be somewhere around 14 something.
Really?
Yeah.
Right, okay.
So it's just like, I think it was possibly around then I maybe got disbelief in that BMI system. Yeah. So
it's a very rough guide, isn't it? Very rough.
And it's tough. Like if you work on the tools all day, and maybe you're a boxer, or maybe you do some lifting in the background. BMI is totally irrelevant. Yeah. You know.
Yeah. So like from Tough Mudder, you start hitting the weights. And how long did it take you? How many, is it like a couple of years before you can reach a strongman event? Or
knowing what I know now, to be really good at strongman, it's going to take you the best part of 10 years. But I never really went into strongman thinking I'm going to be a world champion or anything like that. I would just try to be good at something, you know what I mean? And because I think I worked from such a young age with my father on building sites and stuff, like I was quite naturally strong. I'm naturally a strong person, and I was big, you know, 6'5", 6'6". So after the Tough Mudder, I started squatting and deadlifting regularly every week, and I did my first like powerlifting show December, so 6 months after Tough Mudder, basically. I don't know what weight I did it at. It was around 120 kilos.
Okay.
I don't know what that is.
What's the discipline in powerlifting?
Squat, bench, and deadlift.
Okay.
And squat, bench, and deadlift to certain criteria. You can't just like, you know, there's no half squats. There's, you know, the bar on the bench has got to touch your chest. There's rules, you know what I mean? It's not just like bro lifting in the gym, like I can leg press. It's It was just run by a local gym. And it was quite good because the gym owner come from a lifting background himself, so he was quite strict on the rules, and it was a good little entry. And I think my first little show I did, I think it was 615 kilos across the 3 lifts. So
on your first go,
first go
you'd have
out,
been happy with that.
190 squat, 190 squat, a 265 kilo deadlift, and it was 140 kilo bench press or something like that. It was somewhere around there.
That's amazing. And you've competed in powerlifting, some good lifts. Strongman's a range of different disciplines right?
Yeah. It's still at this point when I've done this competition, I've got no idea what even powerlifting is, what even strongman is. I've got no idea. All I know is powerlifting, squat, bench, and deadlift to this sort of rule set, and it's only because I've learned it in this gym and this, I've had a competition there. And because I obviously did, well, I didn't know how well I did. But looking back now, 615 is actually pretty big numbers.
pretty
big numbers. So
could you do that now?
Yeah, I'd be pretty close to that. Yeah. Like, again, I wouldn't just be able to walk into the gym. I'd have to, because I'd be too nervous at injury. You got to sort of break down into that. But yeah, I'd be pretty close to that now. Like, even at 105, but I'd still be close.
So you know what the disciplines are, right? In powerlifting, with strongman, they change it a lot, don't they?
Every show.
Every show. You're lifting something different.
The only common thing in every show is Atlas stones at the end. That's pretty much your only. You can roughly go by guidelines. You know what I mean? You're gonna have that Atlas stones. You're gonna have some sort of load and moving event. You're gonna have a couple of static events, be it a deadlift or a squat, and then there's going to be a pressing event, which is another static event. But some pressing events aren't static events because you're still moving between implements, which is good.
The one that looks absolutely horrendous to me is the yoke.
Oh yeah, I actually quite enjoyed the yoke.
Because the yoke, you think it looks like if it's to tip forwards or back, it's going to catch on the ground. That's what it looks like.
Yeah,
is that what happens?
Yeah, so that only really happens if you're not in rhythm. You've got to work out your rhythm. You've got to work out a rhythm. It's much like your boxing. You know what I mean? There's a rhythm to throwing punches, and if you're out of rhythm, you look clunky. And when you're clunky on the yoke, it moves back and forward and side to side. But when you watch professionals do it, it doesn't clunk. It just stays solid. You know what I mean? They're almost like trying to brace themselves with the yoke, and they just move as one.
What kind of weight is on the yoke?
So my first strongman show was 300 kilo. So my very first show, you're already starting to move decent weights, and very, very starting in a field amateur weights 300 kilo. That's my starting. That was my very first
beginner
yoke.
Weight 300.
Yeah. That was literally just 4 months after my first powerlifting. No, that was 6 months after my first powerlifting competition. So
did you get to the end? Did you? Because it's a track.
Oh yeah. That actually winning that event won me my first show.
You won your first show?
Yeah. No, that was my first show win. That was my first
show win. Okay.
That was my first that winning that last event in that show. That was one of the only ones that didn't have stones in it. But winning that yoke run was a decider between me and the other guy, and I just nipped him in that one. So I won the show overall.
So how many shows had you competed in up to that point?
That was I think that was number 2. 3. That was number 3. That was the third one.
Show win on your third show?
Yeah. So that was my third one, yeah. And
did you feel like you were going places at that point? You must have been pretty hyped up by that.
It felt good to win, but if I look at my videos, I'll look at with the same sort of thought process as I do now. It's man, you do not look like the guys on the TV.
Right, okay.
It didn't look very tidy, so I was I got an event win, you know what I mean? But I just got to keep improving, you know what I mean? Because
are you quite a critical person of yourself?
Yes.
Yeah. It's something that I always think you find with successful athletes is that you're very critical of your own performance. You're always trying to improve it. You're not happy with the win, even though you win. You're like, well, wasn't clean enough for me.
It wasn't I didn't come away from winning shows thinking, thinking less of the other guys. I was always just looking. My whole thought process was always look at where you can improve, because that's the real positive. Like, focus on your weak areas all the time. Keep looking. So I wasn't looking at them areas in disdain. It was more like, got you. That's where I need to go. That's where I need to move forward.
Yeah.
But unfortunately, you're constantly looking at the negative. You're never getting to enjoy the positive. You're always like, oh, I could have picked up more time there. Like, if I'd made one mistake there, he would have got me there. You know what I mean? So
I think looking at the negatives is the way to go, because you don't want to feel bad about your performance, but you look at the negatives. Those are the only things you can improve.
for sure. But
If you just admire your own positives, what improvement are you going to make on that?
for sure, like I'm sure a lot of high level athletes have done it longer than me. I didn't quite make 10 years doing it, but there's guys out there do it 10 plus years. Some guys even longer.
So you go into Scotland strongman at first, is that right?
Yeah. So I think after that win at that show, my next show was the Scottish qualifier, and that was. You've got to do the Scottish qualifier to get into the Scotland Strongest Man, because there's like 30 odd guys turn up to the qualifier.
Okay. Is there only one qualifier for the whole of Scotland, or?
Yeah. I think before my time there was two. There was a north one and a south one, but numbers obviously dwindled a little bit between the two comps, so they just merged it. But yeah, so it was in my time. It was always just one qualifier, one final. And that was really all there was in Scotland. There was Stephen Cherry, he ran the Scottish Arnolds as well. So in my time in Strongman, there was always Scottish Arnolds as well.
Okay.
And that was probably the next show behind the qualifier, because it had generally most folk from the Scottish lineup.
What's it like when you turn up to the qualifier and you see all these big guys there?
Well, I didn't really know anyone. I didn't know strongman at all. I'd seen it a couple of times on the TV, and I was at this point, like at the Scottish qualifier, I'd met a few characters in the game, and I'd got to train with them, like John Pollock and Stephen Cherry. I met at the qualifier, met a couple of these guys, and these guys really started me off in my training. Like, I had no idea, I had no equipment, no nothing. Like, even the gym that I was doing powerlifting in, they didn't have no equipment for strongman. So my whole first year was literally traveling up and down different places, training with different people, like trying to try to learn this mysterious sport, because it was like there was only literally a handful of people that did it, and there was nobody close to me.
Where did you go to train then?
Literally, my first couple of training sessions were down in like Stevenson, down in like way south of Glasgow, the west coast, like to go and train with a guy, John Pollock, because he'd offered me down to train me and teach me a few things, and then after training with John, he put me on to Stephen Cherry, and he was only an hour and a half down the road, so it seemed just like a jaunt, Yeah. So after the Scottish qualifier, I teamed up with Stephen Cherry, and he gave me a solid foundation of a first year, like training with him. Like, he was already a Scotland Strongest Man winner. Like, I would probably say he was the first guy that I was like, wow, I want to lift what he's lifting. Like, he was lifting scary stuff.
How big is he?
When I first met him, he wasn't the tallest. He was 6'1", 6'2". But he was the same standing up and lying down. Like, he was square. Like, and the man used to move like 400 kilo. Like, he used to run along with 400 kilo yokes, and they'd slip off his back, and the yoke would slip along the concrete, and in mid motion he would just pick it back up and keep running.
Wow.
I was like, that's cool.
Yeah.
So before I'd seen a lot of that stuff on the TV, this is what I was getting to see. I was like, that's what I want to do.
Yeah.
And I was like, that's the person who I sort of not wanted to be, but I wanted to get to them weights. You know what I mean? Like, he was the first real strong person that I trained with.
No, like, it was like a mentor to you.
Oh, definitely at the start, for sure. Like, without him, I definitely wouldn't have gotten anywhere near in the sport, for sure. That guy gave me a solid foundation in a lot of the aspects of the game.
Yeah, it's amazing, and to meet somebody who can just show you another level and show you things that you've not seen before.
Again, Stephen gave me a lot of great help. Like, he had all the equipment as well. He had all the big stuff. He'd also been to a lot of shows. Like, Stephen was, he'd competing in Britain's Strongest Man. One of the top shows in Britain, and He was a Scotland's Strongest Man winner, and just the weights alone he was doing, it was world material. Like before Luke Stokeman came on the go, you know, Stephen Cherry was the man in Scotland. Like he was an absolute powerhouse. Like I seen him pressing a 180 kilo log for 3 reps, like nothing.
Wow.
Yeah, he was an animal. Like squatting 350 kilos like almost 10 years ago.
Right.
Just in a belt and knee wraps, you know.
He's sort of mentoring you. He's you know, talking about the training and the weights. Was he also mentoring you on nutrition as well?
Stephen helped with everything.
Yeah.
Everything. Like I had no idea. Like Stephen really did give me a foundation of knowledge, you know, to expand from, and that's what I did. And to be fair, like right up until the end, until I stopped training, like I used most of the stuff that I learned with Stephen. Even a lot of the training techniques, a lot of the stuff at the core of it had me and Stephen's training together, because it was such simplified training. You could really just put your guts into the training.
What would a week of training look like?
So a typical routine would be like, you know, you'd be in a Monday squatting. This changed towards the end, but you'd have heavy training Monday. So it sort of went in a 2-week rotation. It was always throughout the year. The goal was to have a training orientation like heavy, light, heavy, light, heavy, light, heavy, light. Never 2 heavy days in a row. Never. And if you did it on a 2-week rotation, you can do squat, press, deadlift, and events, all heavy and all light in 2 weeks.
What events?
Well, it depends what you had in show at the time, you know what I mean? But
Okay.
core events, again, me and Stephen, learned from Stephen, core events was like farmer's walk or frame, followed by Atlas stones, or no, sorry, it was yoke and stones and farmer's walk and loading. So at the core, these 4 events pretty much test you across all events.
What explain the farmer's walk, Paul?
So the farmer's walk, it's a bit like the yoke, but instead of it being in your back, it's in your hands. It's just like having a real heavy bag of shopping in each hand, and you got to get to one end of the back or
How
whatever
heavy
the course
is the bag?
Try to give you some entry level stuff. Like entry level stuff's like 120 kilos a hand.
In each hand?
In each hand, yeah. Like
Good grief.
entry stuff for heavyweights, yeah.
And what would the object be?
It's generally just like a frame, like a metal frame with a handle on it, or a gas bottle filled with concrete. There's a lot of them, you know what I mean?
So I think I saw one where they had like a wooden frame. It was sleepers, and the guy standing in the middle of it.
Yep.
Lifting it.
So actually, that same one, that same thing that you're looking at, those wooden sleepers. No, I could be mistaken on that. I was a way to say they actually swapped into yokes, and we actually lift them later on. But I think there were 2 different implements actually.
Okay.
Now that I think on it, owned by the same person. Both horrible implements, that railway sleeper frame and yoke.
When you know, like in my mind, when you say that's at entry level, 120 kilos each hand.
I would be doing that. On a weekly regular.
Yeah, and you've got to pick that up off the ground and then walk with it.
Yeah, generally when you're not in training for competition, you're doing 40 meters with it.
I mean, that's almost like a deadlift, and then you do a walk with your deadlift.
Yeah. Like how many steps is in 40 meters? You got to step 1 foot every time, 140 kilo, and that's just like training. That's not going into any sort of like overloading or, you know what I mean, regular heavy stuff. Like competitions 140, 150 kilo, so you'd be heavier and lighter around that weight.
As you approach the competition, do you increase the weight in your training?
It varies.
Yeah.
It goes up and down. It goes up and down all the time, like heavy light all the time. And you're just trying to get like, you're just trying to work on the speed, and then you're trying to work on a bit heavier, you know what I mean?
The demand on your heart and lungs to supply blood must be enormous. Do you work on cardio at all, or?
Yeah, so not so much as what cardio was. Some people would assume cardio, but we strongmen would work on what is called conditioning. You know, you're working on like stuff that you see in old Rocky movies, you know, flipping tires, hitting sledgehammers off the stuff, actually moving your massive body. Because remember, 140 kilo, moving like that is not easy. So like you swing a sledgehammer at 140 kilo, you soon get out of breath. So I actually focused on that a lot through my career, and probably looking back on it, it was probably a little too much. I probably sacrificed my conditioning, and it probably affected my overall top weight. I preferred to be fitter and lighter than heavier. I didn't cope well with just putting on weight for the sake of weight. You know what I mean?
Yeah. Because, I mean, when you're doing something like a lorry pull or something like that,
that helps.
Having extra weight must be very
Definitely.
handy.
100%. Yeah. Like pools, like mass pools, simple as that. Like, but saying that, I still drew a 200 kilo man in a truck pull and UK's strongest man. So
I watched a video of you pulling a truck on YouTube, and I couldn't actually see you on the finish line, but I knew you were exhausted.
Oh yeah,
I could. The effort you were putting in was crazy. I was like, I can actually feel how absolutely broken Paul is there.
As far as exhaustion goes, like truck pulls and loading races, like some of those things are the worst, because those are the events that you've got to go 100% until you hear the stop whistle. If you slow down whatsoever, you're not finishing. No. So, you know, in World's Strongest Men, when you see like the top guys, they're just like, but then you get like some of the lower down guys and they start to walk. And it's not like, oh, this guy ends up 15 seconds slower. He ends up a minute slower. Aye. Because it starts from a fast, slow jog to a walk. And then it's like, you are so out of breath because you've been working for 2 minutes now.
Aye.
So truck pull, truck pull, loading races stuff. It's something. As soon as you hear the start whistle to the end whistle, it's 100%. And if you can't let off,
you can't lie to yourself.
No, you've got, and it's in them events. That's when you really get to understand what goes on inside your head, because you've got a lot of time to think about that.
Yeah. Well, Paul, that brings me to my next question. Like, mental preparedness. How do you mentally prepare for strongman?
That's tough. It's probably something as well. My mental focus at competition is probably something that's got me in a little bit of bother in the past as well.
Why do you say that?
Well, I was quite an intense character at competitions, and it was sort of the mask that I put on to help me perform better. You know what I mean? It was sort of like the Dr. Jekyll and Mr. Hyde situation. Mm-hmm. You know, you go away and work hard, but during the month, we used to watch a lot of videos on champions, you see, and I used to watch and listen to them about mindset. And before you even tackle physicality, you've got to tackle what's going on between your ears, because you're always your own worst enemy, and it's always yourself that comes up with the excuse, not somebody else. It's yourself that comes up with the excuse, and it's yourself that accepts that excuse. So before you start really wanting to compete, you've got to start competing with yourself. And this is what I learned quite early on. And when I used to go through my 6 to 8 weeks process of getting ready for a show, you know, I wasn't a nice person. You know what I mean? Like, I wasn't out there to make friends. I was trying to be good at something. I almost seen it as like a fight, and it wasn't between other guys. It was a fight, an internal battle, because when that whistle goes at strongman, you can be friends with as much folk as you want at that show, but when that whistle goes and you're standing in front of a bunch of folk and you've not prepared right, it's you that's going to look like the idiot. Mm-hmm. So, and you've let yourself down at that point. Nobody else. Like, it doesn't matter about what else they think. You've let yourself down because you haven't performed as well as you could have. So my whole mental process was really just blocking just anything out, just blocking everything out and being completely in my own world. And yeah, that, like, you know, when you're super focused on something, you scowl at people sometimes, you know, it happens, but people used to think it was, you know, I had something personal against them. It wasn't the case. I was just locked in at that point, you know what I mean? It was, one of my grievances was that it shows that you didn't get treated the same as, like, you wouldn't walk up to a fighter on his, like, walk into the ring, but yet people want to speak to you as a strongman as you're, like, walking to the show, and, you know, like, I'm tense and I'm nervous too, you know what I mean? Like, I'm trying to hold it all in too, you know. So sometimes I came across as, you know, grumpy. And yeah, I was a bit grumpy, but it was to help the mental focus for the show. You know, I didn't want any negative thoughts to be implanted, or, you know, oh, it's raining today. I know, you know what I mean? Like, I know it's raining. I know it's going to be slippy. I know all that. I'm already going through that. I don't need you to reinforce any of that. So that's sort of where it came from, my mental focus. And to be honest with you, I don't really care, because it was my biggest strength in every show. And when I started realizing that if I just sit in the middle of a show and it starts to piss a rain, if I sit with my headphones on, I guarantee you I will be the best person in the rain or in a bad situation, because they're all chatting about it. They're all like, oh, what we're going to do, what footwear we're going to put on. I don't care. I'm just going to go out and do it. I'm going to get cracking. I'm going to do it my way. And I don't need a bunch of folk that have come from, they've got their own perspective on it. I've got my perspective on it. If I mess it up, then it's on me. Like, that's sort of how I tackled it. And I learned that from being where they were. Like, oh, what's going on? What footwear you got on there? Oh, I see a couple of guys tripped with that. What's happening? Oh, there's puddles. It's all just smoke and mirrors. You know what I mean?
I used to see that in boxing. As I'm involved with boxing for a long time, you go into the changing room and you see how everybody's mentally preparing. And there'll be a few guys like you sitting there. They've blocked out the whole world. They've got the headphones on and they don't talk to anybody.
That was me, for sure.
I think that's a great way to prepare, because you come into competition and you have, you've maybe, I don't know, but you visualized how the competition is going to unload in your head, and you want to keep that in your mind and keep the distractions away.
Well, quite from an early on, even like I can remember in my first Scotland's Strongest Man, like in my week up to that competition, where you've got to take time off training and stuff, like a lot of weird, like a lot of pent up aggression comes in that week. You know what I mean? And it's great because it's for the show, but everyone around you suffers at that point. And if you say you're not that person, then you're not really that competitive. Like, it's got to spew out a little bit. You know what I mean? It's like,
you expend a lot of nervous energy in the lead up to it, right?
For sure. And that's another reason why I learned to try and just keep myself.
What emotions?
Don't say I was that successful at the competitions, but I did my best.
What emotions do you feel going into competition? Do you feel fear? Do you feel excitement? It
depends on how you look at it. Like, I think everyone feels fear, but it just depends how you process that. You know what I mean? Some people can see fear as a negative thing, but for me, like, when I'm nervous and I'm a little bit scared and maybe hurting myself or stuff, like, it helps me focus a bit more. It makes me a bit more edgy. It makes me a bit more of the way people don't like, but it makes me better at competing. It made me more sharp, It made it feel easier to like get the on switch on, you know what I mean? And it's also why I didn't like shutting that down and speaking to people and sort of like switching it off. I liked it sort of just simmering below the surface, you know what I mean?
Did you ever go into a competition not feeling that way?
Yeah, a couple.
And how did you perform then?
Poor.
Yeah.
Yeah.
But is it because you're taking it for granted, or you feel like it's too easy, and then you're not nervous, or you don't have the fear? Or
no, there was only a couple of shows that I didn't really feel nerves before, and they were more like team shows. But every like single performance show that I went out there, I hated it. I hated it. I hated the nerves before it.
Yeah.
I've always been sort of a nervous person before I would do something relatively big. I may look like, oh, here's big grumpy Paul and he just looks like a stone hard face, but it's not what's going on underneath the surface. Like, I'm proper nervous. Like, I've not eaten all day. Like,
before, let's say, what would be the first event? Let's say it's the yoke, right?
Yeah.
So
that's a good start.
Let's say it's the yoke, right? So if you're lining up for the yoke, just at the moment before it starts, how do you feel? Do you feel strong or do you feel weak? How do you feel with the nerves, the adrenaline? Are you ready?
So as soon as I touch the implement, I'm fine.
Okay.
As soon as I touch the implement, it's all good. But right up until that, it's nerves. It's the main thought process of what happens if you don't pick it up. Honestly, it's
Really?
what happens if you don't pick it up. What happens if you go to pick this thing up and it stays welded to the floor?
Right.
Like that. That was literally. Yeah. It was it was such a nervous feeling just before. But then as soon as I sort of touched the implement, that went away because it just went into focusing on picking it up. Make sure that doesn't happen.
Has there ever been a time when you were taking part in an event and you've just been overwhelmed by the weight of it? This is just far too heavy for me.
Nah, like, it's too heavy. It's too heavy. Just gotta do your best. You know?
Your best.
Like, it was like, definitely remember being in my first UK final and the yoke was like, It was unbalanced. It was like 500 kilo or something. They said it was like 1,000 pounds, but like it was more than that. And because there was a couple of guys that are really good at yoke and they didn't finish. And I think I moved at like 6 meters or something. That was like, wow, that's heavy, you know. But in my end of the career, I managed to move the half ton down the runway.
Half a ton. That's 500 kilos.
Yeah. Half ton.
What's the world record on that?
Oh, it's massive.
Is it?
It's massive. Oh, yeah. Like, I don't even know.
I think I saw the guy in a documentary. He's like a big vegan athlete.
No.
He's not a vegan.
No. Like, don't even mention his yoke runs. My yoke runs were bigger than his.
Oh, really?
Oh, yeah.
Really? What was he lifting?
It was somewhere like 400 something kilo.
Yeah, I
400.
thought
it was like around 1,000 pounds.
Yeah.
I did that regular in competition for
Right.
years. Like,
okay.
Like Scotland's strongest man finals like 400 kilo. Scotland, you know, like
And that's just Scotland.
that's just Scotland. Like you go into Britain's strongest man and you're easy walking with 1,000 pounds down the runway. You know what I mean? Like
Minimum, probably.
minimum,
Isn't it?
and that's not just I can do the yoke. You've got log, you've got stones, you've got everything to do there. It's not just I'm good at the yoke. Like his log was abysmal.
What was your favourite event? What was your favourite discipline? Sorry.
Anything moving, really, anything moving. That's what I was naturally best at. Early on, I had a bit of a flair for the deadlift because I was a bit faster and explosive, but some injuries later on stunted my progress in the deadlift, which was a bit sucky because I was close to 400, very close to a 400 kilo deadlift, and it was a big goal of mine to try and get that because that was sort of like, even if you made it or not, a 400 kilo deadlift's like entry level world's strongest man level. You know what I mean? You're starting to get to the 1% of the 1% in there, you know. So that was a big goal of mine that I didn't quite achieve. But as I said, injuries in my left hip, I could not figure that injury out. I just could not figure it out. I just got sharp pains in my back and the hip, and I even went with a few coaches to try and like get rid of the pain and try changing my technique a few times, you know.
Yeah, how do you cope with injury then? Do you have to take a long rest or?
Oh, there's many. I actually did really well with injury. I really did, because early on in my career, I actually tore my left pec. It was pretty much torn off, and I had to get it stitched back on. Thanks to ARI, they did a great job there. And actually,
how did you tear it?
I tore it doing dumbbell press and stupid.
In the gym?
Yeah, stupid.
Not even in competition?
No, not in competition. Dumbbell press, lying flat on my back, flat dumbbell press. One of the most stupid exercises you could do as a strongman. Like, just no need for flat dumbbell press.
Okay.
Absolutely none whatsoever. And if you're trying to be a strength athlete, don't be doing dumbbells in a flat, like especially super heavy ones. Like, that's just stupid. Great, it's great in a certain way, but try to do heavy ones. Like I was doing at the same time, I was doing 78 kilos in a hand.
Why is that no good for strongman, a dumbbell press?
Because you're lying flat on your back. It's the angle of it. It has zero transfer to any other event.
Okay.
In the whole spectrum of events, like there is not a bench press. Well, there has been in the past, but it won't come into play.
When you're training, you're trying to mimic the events with whatever exercises you're doing.
Well, yeah, for sure. But the bench press and the flat dumbbell press holds all risk with very little reward. So why do it?
Looks cool.
Well, yeah, yeah, that's what I thought until my pec. Like, I'll show you the video. Like, I'll either give you the video, and
when the gym's full, you put the maximum weight on and go for it.
If you watch the video yourself, you'll see that I managed, and this was my third set of these.
Okay,
this is my third set of these, and I was having a banging night. I was having a great night. There's no, it's getting sore. That feels a bit tight tonight. This was my best night in my, like, I was 2.5 years into strength training, and I was pressing almost 80 kilo dumbbells in a flat for 3 sets of 5. And it was on my 15th rep, the last rep of the last set, literally on the way down. You just whipping off it come. Like, you just see the dumbbell fall off to the side, and I was like, what was that? Didn't even feel it. I was like, what? I just seen a massive judder. I was like, what was that?
How did it feel?
It literally felt like someone just going into your chest. It just felt like someone just giving you a little jab, and because I was like amped up from lifting, like, you don't feel it. And I was like, whoa. And again, Stephen, Jerry, man, I've just done this in training. He's like, you've torn your pec, mate. You need to go to hospital. I'm like, maybe I'll leave it till morning, because I'd already said to the wife, I was like, I'll go and get girlfriend at the time, I was like, I'll go and get an ice pack. And she's like, I think you need to go to the hospital. And then before I'd finished my conversation with Stephen Cherry, it was like twice the size. It was like a football. And he's like, yeah, you need to go to hospital. So that's what we did. And that right there was my first blessing in disguise, because that right there was that was a real test of fortitude, as in like, you've really hurt yourself here. You're going to have to get surgery on it. So you can either back away from this strength stuff, or you can use this as a learning opportunity, because it's going to happen in the future. And Stephen also said in the phone, he's like, welcome to the club, because you're not a real strongman until you tear a muscle anyway. So
there must be so many injuries.
Happens all the time, man. But this wasn't just like a belly tear. This was a big tear.
How long does that take to recover from?
It depends. It depends how much money you have, how much time you've got, and how much effort mainly you're willing to spend. I recovered from that really well. I actually got that stitched back on a week later, and I was in cast for about 4 weeks. But in that 4 weeks, I was constantly just like moving my arm a little bit, getting my arm a little bit moving, just getting some sort of mobility in my arm. And then after 4 weeks, once I could get my sort of elbow up my shoulder, I was like, right, I'm starting to get some mobility in this. Went straight to the physio, where I met a lovely physio, Heather. She taught me so much about like just how muscles work and just general like body physiology, and it sort of helped me understand like rehab and that. It helped me understand how sort of muscle is processed and how it regenerates, and how you sort of, people always, it might sound familiar, you know, people say to big guys, oh, you know, your muscles are strong, but your tendons get left behind. And it's absolutely a true thing. And when you looked at my pec tear, it's not the muscle that tears, it's the tendon. It's every muscle has a tendon at each end, you know what I mean? And it's generally, there's 3 types of tears that can come from: bone to tendon, tendon to muscle, or a belly tear. Mine was bone to tendon, and that's the most common, is bone to tendon. And it comes from tension in the tendons, not the muscles. So this is where I started to learn all my warm-up sequences and all this, from all this pec tear. This is where all my warm-up sequences came all from, right through my strongman period. And when people used to question it, I'm like, I don't need to be questioned. I know this works for me. I don't need to go and like, see, in the warm-up areas, you used to see the guys going like deadlifting and all that to warm up. I don't need none of that. I need a couple of bands, a foam roller, and a couple of the exercises that I've learned now, and I'm good to go for a 1,000-pound yoke straight off the bat. Like I'm good to go in like half an hour. Like you give me that, and I'm good to go. Like a couple of pickups of something heavy, and I'm ready.
That like that would shock a lot of people listening, that you turn up to a strongman event with a foam roller. What do you do with it?
Well, a lot of guys don't like the foam roller, but I used to like just moving around on the foam roller, because one, it helps. The technical term is myofascial release, but it's just a way of loosening up muscle fibers. If you think your muscles like a garden hose, a bunch of different garden hoses, and they're supposed to run in conjunction with each other. But after you've trained, you tear some of these hoses, and when they rejoin, don't rejoin in conjunction. They rejoin in sort of like a spaghetti junction type situation. You know what I mean? They're all twisted and they're all messed up. So what you're trying to cause with myofascial release is you're trying to get all these fibers lined up again. And that's why when people lie in the foam rolling, it hurts. That's because all your muscles they're all tight. They're all knotted. Where it hurts on the foam roller is where you need work. That's where you're tight, and it's where you're sore. So if I gave you a foam roller and told you to go and roll out your IT band, you'd be in absolute agony. Because I've done it for years and years. Mine's is fine.
After that injury, did that shift your focus to a lot more kind of flexibility, stretching, that kind of thing?
Yes, absolutely. That's what I learned in that process of the pec tear, that if you're not strong enough, you just won't lift it. Simple as that. It'll just not move. But if you're tight and you're not mobile enough to lift it, that's when stuff starts to tear. That's when stuff starts to break. And that's when you start hurting yourself. And your body's been telling you this long before you've touched that bar. So it's completely your fault. It's not like, oh, well, it was the equipment or it was slipping. No, that was telling you long before you touched that implement. And if you've done a correct warm-up sequence, you would understand what's tight and what's not. And maybe you could have adjusted your training plan for that day if you've went through a correct sequence of warming up.
That's a very good point. Yeah.
And I learned that quite early on.
Did you notice when you started working your flexibility more and warming up that your performance improved?
Yeah, for sure. I was always, thankfully, touch wood, it was genetically, I was quite flexible. And I managed to, because I hurt myself such early on, I managed to keep a lot of my flexibility. And that's why I've left with such good shoulders in good condition. My knee are great. My hips are in good condition. I've not got a sore back or none. So genetically, naturally, I was always quite a mobile person. And thankfully, from an early injury, I didn't just sacrifice body weight for like ultimate strength. I tried to be fit and I tried to be mobile, like, because that was the way I kept myself safe. Hey, if I'm not strong enough, I'll just not lift it. Like, but if you turn up to show and say you're going to do this and then you go to lift it and something tears, well, that was totally your fault.
Would you say like a lot of the successful guys in strongman are doing the same thing as you? Like you can't get to a certain level unless you're actually thinking about your mobility and how you prepare. And
it's a total package. When you're trying to, like, even if you're trying to get to Britain's strongest man, not world's, not Europe's, not like, if you're trying to get to, like, you know, arguably one of the toughest shows in Britain. There's Britain's strongest man and UK's strongest man, both very tough shows. If you're trying to get to one of those shows, like, you've got to be thinking, if you're trying to think that you want to be podium in one of these shows, you've got to be thinking you're coming up against some of the best people. If you're going to Britain's strongest man, you're coming up against some of the best people in the world. Like, some of Britain's athletes are very high competitors and world's strongest men. So if you're going to Britain's, you're right up there. You know, you're starting to lift with some serious names. And if you're not thinking about, you know, eating properly, stretching properly, you know what I mean? Like, if you don't get regular physio and stuff like that, to me, that sounds bizarre. Like, that, to me, it sounds bizarre. Like,
yeah, you can't just rely on being strong. There needs to be.
You're not going to last.
Yeah,
you're just not going to last. Like, your body's just not going to last on you. You know what I mean? Like, I thought I treaded carefully. You know what I mean? And I still had certain issues during the time. And yeah, it's something that needs to be focused on. You know what I mean? If you're not, like, simple thing, if you're not drinking water, you're going to start tearing stuff real quick. Like,
have attitudes changed over time? Because when you look back at the days of like Jeff Capes or Glenn Ross, like, those boys don't look like they do a stretch. I mean, they were just very, very strong.
They were just mentally tough men.
Mentally tough men.
Different times then. There was no such thing as being sore. Like, some of the names that you just mentioned, like, these guys go and get absolutely hammered drunk on a Sunday, turn up to a show and do some of their best weights ever. Like, just a different breed of men.
How do they compare to athletes now, though?
Well, they don't really. It's a totally different era. Like, athletes now, they take it more seriously. There's more run up. There's more actually knowledge to it. It's you know, and some of the weights nowadays, man, they're astronomical. Like, I don't think, like, guys like Jeff Capes and Paul Sigmarsson and, you know, Bill Caswire. Well, arguably Bill, if you gave Bill a go in today's day, I think he'd do pretty well. But they're totally different weights. Totally different weights. You know what I mean? Like, back then, big Bill's, you know, pushing out 150, 160 log. You know, they're doing that in Scotland now. Yeah. You know, comfortably. You know.
Yeah.
So it's just a different weight category. Like, another one, the Atlas stones. Like, Pudzianowski, like, everybody goes on about Pudzianowski. The heaviest stone load Pudzianowski done, his heaviest stone was maybe 140, 150 kilo. Maybe arguably it could have been a touch heavier than that. One of my last years in Scotland's strongest man, 200 kilo stone in it. You know what I mean? Like, world level stones, you know, and 5 or 6 guys in the lineup of the final Scottish finished the run.
Paul, just that is my favourite event, is the stones, right? Can you just explain the stones for the listeners? Explain the Atlas stones.
I would say an opening comment was, at the end of a show and you're tired, and after a pre-workout, if you was ever going to have an accident in the middle of an event, Atlas stones is definitely one of those events. You know, there are a lot of nerves going at the last one. You just got one event to go, man. You just want a clean run on them stones. You don't want your tacket to slip. It's probably the most stressful thing about the stones is getting your tacky on your arms and getting it actually to a state that it stays good. You know what I mean? Like,
What do you cover your arms in chalk or something, or?
well, it's called strongman tacky. It's like resin, tree resin. There's all different types of makes out there. But it's all affected by heat and moisture, and you know what I mean. So you see the guys at the end of the show with their blow torches out, getting tacky, all warmed up, ready to go, and you can put it on like syrup, and then it cools down, and it just goes like tree resin, like glue, and it just helps your forearms stick to the stone.
What are the weights of the stones? The first stone to the last one.
My best completed run in Scotland's was 100 kilo to 200 kilo, 6 stones, 100. 120, 140, 160, 180, 200.
6 stones.
6 stones.
It looks, to me, it looks so awkward, that last stone, to try and get your arms around it, and you're lifting it to quite a height. For you, it must have been a bit easier, I think, because of your natural height compared to other competitors, was it?
Yeah, like obviously being a little bit taller in stones helps, but believe me, there's some good short stone loaders out there. But yeah, being taller helps. Like when I stand up with it on my chest, like I was pretty much at platform height. I just needed a little whoop, and it was on there, you know. But 200 kilo stone, like it didn't matter what stone you picked up. Like when you touched a 200, you knew it was 200 kilo before you even picked the thing up, before you even braced on it. As soon as you got your arms around that thing, that was, you know, 200 kilos generally almost be 2 foot across the center of it. You know what I mean? Like it's just a big boy, and then you pick it up, and it literally it takes your whole sort of chest cavity. So you know it's a big stone before you go get it.
It's a hard watch when you're watching a guy try to get the last stone and he can't get it, you know, and they're trying, and just even getting onto their knees and then struggling. You can almost, you're struggling with them in your mind when you watch them.
Do you know why a lot of strongmen really wrestle with the stones? Because it's not the weight, it's just the awkwardness. And these guys are sitting, I've been there myself with a stone in my lap. It's just 180 kilo, man. Stand up with it. You know what I mean? All you got to do is get your stomach underneath it at the right point and you'll just stand up with it. But man, when you're tired, just like anything, like man, when you're tired, like somebody throws a basic boxing combo at you and you're just like, what happened there? You know? And you just can't process fully. But when you're tired and the stones is on your knees, like it's just, it sounds like a lot of weight to maybe some of your listeners, but like to strong men out there that are aspiring to be world's strongest man, like what I was trying to be, it's just not a lot of weight. Like 180 kilo, 200 kilo, like you could put that on a bar and a lot of us will clean that to our chest. You know what I mean? Like, so it's frustrating having this damn stone on your knees and you're like, I've just got to get it there. It's just like at eye level at this point. You're just staring at it. You're like, so
just the shape
that's
of it.
why a lot of guys wrestle with that last stone. You know what I mean? Like, got to get it up there. Like, you can't get it to your knee. I'm halfway there. Like, it's the competitiveness, and you know what I mean? So,
yeah, I think that the Atlas Stones is so exciting, but very hard to watch sometimes. And I can imagine there's a lot of people, like, I don't know, they just fall over with the stone. Do they collapse? Or
there's been a few accidents for sure. Like, probably the most memorable one in World's Strongest Man would be when Big Z went to do his Zadrunas Saviscus, when he went to do one of his first stone runs. He went to load the 140 stone, lost balance, and he actually he lost his footing and the stone come right down on his chest. He actually went to try and pick it up after, but I think he realised that he'd hurt his chest and gave it up. But that was like one of the most brutal things that I've ever. Well, there's been a few bad videos online, but that's the most memorable one that I can think of.
He's going to feel that in the morning for sure.
It's definitely 140 kilo
on the chest,
just like straight in the middle of your chest. I don't know how he didn't break his rib cage. It's just like a testament to how strong a man is.
What have you got on your feet? Is there like a steel toe cap or something? Or
no, whatever you want. You could do it barefoot if you want. There's no rules.
There must be. Wait, you know, I have seen guys picking up heavy weights in their socks.
Yeah, some guys do it. Some guys will deadlift in their socks, you know, because it's lower to the ground. You know what I mean?
Of course, right.
You know, you're in the deadlift, you want to be as low as you can be. So that's why some guys, you know, will adopt. That's where the whole sumo stance comes in, because you're getting lower to the ground. But that's obviously banned in strongman. You know,
I don't like it. I don't like the look of it.
It's just against the rules.
It looks so awkward, the sumo stance.
Yeah, it is. It all depends on your hip. Like, I could probably get used to it because my hips are quite open, so I could probably work with it. In fact, for someone that's 6'5", I hate to say it, but sumo would probably be more beneficial. But I've got to say, all the biggest weights by the biggest men the biggest weights by the biggest men have been lifted conventionally. And that is if you want to deadlift, learn to deadlift conventionally. You know what I mean? Now, I'm not saying some people are better suited to sumo, but just learn to deadlift conventionally will make you stronger, because you've got to lift it in an awkward position. You've got to learn to do it. If you do it wrong, you're going to hurt your back.
Have you ever turned up to strongman and then like looked at the list of disciplines for the day and there's a complete curveball on there? You're like, what the hell is this? What are we doing here?
No, I don't say you turn up and you look at the list and say there's a curveball. You normally get thrown the curveball as your athlete meeting. Oh, by the way, we've not got this implement, so it's going to be this today.
Okay.
And you're like, all right. But that's also the point where I like being in the focus. Because a lot of people will be like, oh. And I used to go, magic. That's great. Change as much events as you want. Because what I was saying magic to was everybody's expression. Mm-hmm. And I learned that earlier on, like, because I was one of the ones that used to be like, oh, come on, like, you can't change that. Mm-hmm. And then I realized if you actually go the opposite way, you've just gotten a massive, like, mental boost over your competition.
Yeah, they've had a setback in
they
their
want
mind.
to regress. And I've just went, well, I'm actually more equipped, well-rounded in all events, so this benefits me. You've had training in this. They've just thrown that wild card in there. I'm probably going to be half decent at it anyway, so that was my opinion. If it was moving, it didn't matter. Throw it in. Don't care what it is. If it's moving, you put it in and I'll do well in it. Like, I'll believe I'll do well in it.
Speaking back on that again, how you're looking at the other competitors and they're defeating themselves a little bit in their head. What's it like kind of backstage and with the other competitors during the competition? Is there a bit of camaraderie? Are you chatting, or is it fiercely competitive? Is there beefs?
Hey, it's a sport. It's competitive, men. There's all of the above, you know. I didn't really go to the shows to sort of like make friends and go for the camaraderie. That's not like it existed. But again, I was trying to be in my own little world, and I was trying to I was focusing on to get the job done. You know, I was there. I trained a lot, and you know, spent a lot of time in every show. It didn't matter what it was. Like if I'd signed up for a show, I'd put a lot of time into training for it. Even if it was that one way back in a field somewhere or on a shut down street, I'd put a lot of time and effort into my training for shows. And when I turned up to strongman shows earlier on, obviously you're starting to meet a bunch of new folk, and I actually felt like that type of like speaking and cheering people on, like, come on, mate, go for it, like, tired you out. Affected your performance. And it affected it massively, especially if you've got a friend that you've been training with or something like that. Like, you know what I mean? My biggest energy jumps came from a couple of the very few competitions I actually got to compete with Stephen Cherry. And it's because I was cheering him on. And it's just like after, it's like, man, I feel flat now. I don't feel like I've got that sharpness no more. So
I was like that when I boxed. I wouldn't come out and watch any of the fights prior to. A lot of guys will go out of the changing room and they'll just watch other guys that they box with.
Yeah.
Or they're in the same club. But I would never do that. I would always just stay away, and then just like you, kind of try and shut off a little bit.
Yes. And it wasn't really to think about anything. It was just not to think. Because as you said, the nervous energy. What if?
Yeah, you waste a lot of energy.
What's the point? Just shut up as an inside your own head. Just shut up and just, when they call your name, just crack on. Like at this point, like you've done everything you can do. Just be still. You know, try to avoid that energy dump that you obviously we're talking about, and learning that earlier on. You know, I almost tried to shy away from that. I would see after the show, no problem. I'll speak to you, pal. Like I've got all the time in the world for you. In fact, my missus bloody hated it after the shows because I'd really chatting to folk. Yeah. But during the show, I did not want to speak to you. Like, I don't care who you was. Like, if you're the show promoter, come and tell me what you need to tell me. And good, cool, no worries. Right, I'm good. I'll just sit down. I don't need to know about anything else. Like, if it concerns me, tell me. And I can understand people feel a certain way about that, but I was just looking after me. You know what I mean? That's the more energy I had, the less energy, the less chance of getting hurt. You know what I mean?
I think anyone that's ever competed in a sport at a decent level would understand that. And if it's not a team sport, especially as an individual, I mean, golfers, they have to try and keep in the zone and strongmen, boxers, anyone who's doing any kind of individual sport, I think it really helps if you can keep your mind shut off to everything.
And other true competitors recognise that. You never want to see, even if it's someone you don't like, you never want to see them get hurt. You never want to see them do poorly because they got hurt or because of an equipment failure. You never want to see that. So even though I wasn't maybe cheering you on, if there was an equipment failure, I felt bad for you. I just didn't let you know about it because, well, it's kind of a bonus for me. You know what I mean? Like, it's going to affect you for the rest of the show. You know what I mean? But I did feel bad for the people. Like, if this happened to them, you know, if people got treated unfairly, I did definitely felt bad. But just didn't let nobody know about it. As far as they were concerned, I didn't care. And at the time I didn't, but I would always, there's always reflection, you know what I mean? Like, and I found out when you sit like this in your own little world, you start to remember quite a lot from shows. Like in my first couple of shows, I just remember a couple of feelings. Feeling I was either amped or tired and then exhausted. That's generally how it went. But then as you start to sit down and not include anyone else, and you just start to hear and see more, you know what I mean? You start to see the behaviors of people when they're nervous and things like that. Like, you just take a lot more away from the experience of competition.
It gives you strength that when you see other competitors nervous,
yeah,
you know, you think, well, I was nervous, but I'm looking at that guy and he's nervous, you know, and he's maybe more nervous than I am.
Yeah, for sure. And that was the way that I, you know, didn't let them know that I was nervous. I was just stone faced, like, I don't care.
Yeah.
You know what I mean? And again, like, as I got to some of the bigger shows, I had my outbursts, you know what I mean? But just, again, nobody can do nothing about the weather and things like this, you know what I mean? Just timing and things like that. When stakes get higher for yourself, you know what I mean? Like, tempers flare a little bit, you know, when the rain comes on, you got truck pull to do.
So here, Paul, these are like, so we've talked about injuries, mental prep, weather, things that can go wrong. What about the high points? What were the high points in strongman for you?
You know, I got to, some of the high points was just some of the people that I got to meet and have time with, you know what I mean? Like, as far as like competition results, like that was what it was. Like, they were just things at the end of training, you know what I mean? Like, obviously winning UK's Strongest Man and being the only Scotsman to do that, even after a lot of guys have tried, you know.
Luke Stoltman tried that, right?
Yeah, both the brothers did. Yeah,
they were both in there.
Yeah, they were both in there.
But they didn't get the UK's Strongest Man.
Not quite.
I know they're very strong men, but
absolutely, yeah. Well, they trumped me a little bit by getting, you know, by Big Tom getting that World's Strongest Man title. So well done to him. But yeah, they both had a go at UK's. They both podium multiple times at UK's. But it's a tough show to win. You know, 3-day show. You know, 15 events across the 3 days. You know, if you're unlucky, you can avoid some eliminators and stuff like that. But it's probably, like, honestly, one of the toughest shows on the planet, because World's Strongest Man, a lot of people don't know, is actually held over the course of like 5-6 days, and there is you might only have like 2 events a day.
Okay.
And even if you're a finalist, you'll have like the days that you're working, it'll be like 2 events, 2 events, 2 events, break, 3 events, 3 events. So like the most you're doing is 3 events. Now obviously these men are massive. They're trying to put everything into a performance. So when you start talking about 3 days in a row and you're doing more than they are, like
five events a day.
5 events a day. And it used to be more. Like way back before when they started off, it used to be 6 events, 8 events. Like when the daddy was winning it, when the guy Glenn Ross, he's the proprietor, the organizer of the show. When he was winning it, that was an all day thing. Like they started it in the morning and they were still competing at nighttime. So it was a lunatic competition. It's a tough competition, and it takes no prisoners because it's 3 days in a row. And if you're not in shape, and if you're even slightest bit banged up, that show will eat you alive. Like it is a no holds barred, like 3 days in a row. Like it is technically an amateur show, but it is a tough show. Like if you think, oh, I'm just going to go to World Strong, I love how people just come in, because I was the same, just like, all right, I just want to get to the final. You've got no idea what is waiting for you across 3 days. Like one slip up and you'll get seriously hurt. Like
I can imagine like the pain that your body must be in from a single event, just from doing one discipline, the pain, because like say you were doing the truck pull where you're giving it 100% for the whole, however long it takes. How long would it take? 20 seconds?
A truck pull between 30 and 40 seconds, yeah.
To maximum exertion. I mean, if you think about Usain Bolt, his whole career
10
arrives
seconds.
at 10 seconds of running in the Olympics. And
how
it's
heavy is he?
Maximum force, right?
Yep.
And he must be in pain after that, you know, like, and for you to be putting maximum exertion on pulling a truck down a track
15 times 3 days.
yeah, each one, the pain must be unbelievable.
Well, on the third day, like this is what you need experience to do well at UKs, is because you need to experience that third day. You can't do well until you experience that and know that that's coming. Like that, the pain in the third day when you get out of bed, man, that you better have your head screwed on at that point, because you're like, at any other time of the year, you're like, I'm not doing nothing today. Like this, it's an accumulation of 2 competitions now. You know what I mean? Mm-hmm. And you've definitely gotten banged up. Like I always come into UKs, like I was quite lucky. I was smart in my training and things like that. I always used to come in really good shape. I used to come in, you know, low injuries and very well rehearsed in some of the stuff that I thought I'd be bad in. And that's where I really focused on, just the stuff that I would be bad in. And by that alone, I sort of swerved a lot of injuries, you know, but there was a lot of static guys that got hurt in the moving stuff. And then there was a lot of small guys, there were some small guys that got hurt in the heavy stuff, you know what I mean? So
when you're looking at your competitors coming into the UK's strongest man, if someone comes in new, right, there's some new blood in there. It's the first time
to
they've
see
been
them on the third day.
Yeah, that's exactly what I was going to ask you. Like they have no idea. Is that what you're thinking?
Oh yeah, I can't wait to see that face on the third day, just to beat you with a smile. Right, mate, how's it going today? Tired? Well, they see you with a smile and they just think, oh man, what an a-hole. But
yeah,
I know how you feel, mate. I'm feeling the same. It's just because I've got a smile and you don't.
Yeah. Well, you know what to expect, you know, and I think, I mean, I can compare that to boxing, because when you're in the gym and you're sparring, it's quite hard, right? But then when you go to fight, it's 100% maximum effort for the full duration. The other guy's going to do that as well.
And now you've got adrenaline too.
Yeah, but when you know it, when you've experienced it, the next time round, you know what to expect. It's going to be, you know, it's hard. It's the hardest thing you're going to do, right? And just accepting, like you are going into the last day, accepting that, okay,
it's going to
this
suck.
is how hard it's going to be and how painful it's going to be. But I know I'm prepared for that. Whereas a guy coming in on his first rodeo, he's just not ready for the last day.
No, I was. The first time I was in UK's was in 2015. You remember the first time I started squatting and deadlifting regular was the end of 2013. So I'm a year and a half into this now, and I'm now find myself at UK's strongest man, and that's why I will profanely remember, because even getting to the final of UK's strongest man is difficult. Just like if you're an amateur strongman right now, it's definitely in your head, I want to try and make it to the final of UK's. That's a massive achievement. And I managed to do that in my first year. And it was because of that, I was way out of my depth. And you wake up on that third day and you're like, what the hell is this? It honestly literally felt like you'd been punched and kicked in the guts and your legs are just like sort of numb. And this is 2 days now. And because I was out of my depth, it wasn't just like, oh, I'll do good here and I'll be able to pick up points. No, it was just like, let's go. You've got to push. Let's try and just get out of day one. And I got out of day one. And then day two comes around. Well, you're in day two, so let's try and get to the final. And try and get to the final, you've spent your reserves. They're gone. And you wake up and you got nothing. Your CNS is gone. Your central nervous system, it's gone. Like, getting out of bed and picking up your phone is difficult. Like, you're just like, oh, you know, when you've had like a super hard day at work or you've been working in the garden or something like that, and you wake up the next day and you're like, oh my God. It's like one of those, it's like that. And it's like, I got to do this shit again. I got to go again. I got to go for another 5 or 6 events today.
How did you get on the last day?
I was last in the final.
Okay.
But I still making it to the final in my first year. I was still 8th in the UK. Like, it was, I didn't.
And you gained pretty valuable
knowledge.
You gained valuable knowledge from.
That was the biggest thing that I took away from every show. I just tried to learn from every show, but I learned because I got to the final in my first year, I was like, man, I can work on that now. Like I'm prepared for some of the stuff that's going to get thrown at you. And it's sort of where like the whole try not to let event changes bother you, because it was at UK's that it probably bothered me the most, because it happened the worst there. You know what I mean? Like event changes, last minute changes.
Something else that must be hard to manage, right? When, you know, speaking of 3-day events, right, is you're eating up to the event and eating at the event. Like, how do you manage your food on a 3-day event?
Oh man, that was almost my biggest. That was again in the first year there. It was my biggest, because I didn't eat when I competed. You see, and doing 1-day shows, that's totally fine. You can do that because you've just been stapping yourself like for the last week. Like you've got as much energy as like everything's full. Like your glycogen levels is up, your water levels is up. You know, everything's up.
You have enough to last you for a show.
Yeah. Like, and you can go for a show, but when you've not been eating properly, when you've only been even really eating like a bit of breakfast because you're nervous, pardon me, and then you're eating something reasonable back at a hotel after the show. It's not like you're going home for home cooked food. You're just going back for like a burger and chips out of, you know, a hotel restaurant somewhere. And after 3 days, man, that affects you. You know, like my first year there, I managed to get over 130. I think it was maybe 134 kilo. I'd have to watch. It's still on Channel 5. It's still all on Channel 5 in my first year's My 5 on the app. And I'd have to go back. I think it was 100. I think it said it was 134 on the screen, and it definitely wasn't 130 when I left on the third day.
No.
Oh no! I was well under 130.
Right.
Like, oh yeah, you're losing weight, like losing water, losing weight, burning calories, just not eating enough. Like, and that's really what progressed through my whole strongman. That's kind of.
How much do you need to eat?
Well, when I was 156 kilo and got some stomach issues and that, dropped a little bit of weight. Like
150 kilos, that's like what, 340 pounds?
That's more than that. 156 kilo would be about 350, 60 pounds, 60 pounds,
360
60,
pounds.
70 pounds, yeah.
Right, so how much are you eating in a day?
Right there, you're you know, if you're not eating, if you're sitting doing nothing and you're not eating 4,000 calories, you're losing weight.
But you are training.
Oh yeah, you're training 5 times a week.
So you need more than 4,000 calories.
Well, yeah, to just to maintain that, you know, 6,500 calories, 7,000 calories a day to maintain that and training.
Okay, so
that's ultimately what led me to really struggling towards the end. Like, and what gives me more respect for the top level guys. Like, the training is one thing, but like the training and the eating go hand in hand, and the eating is the most important, that you will not get to. Like, go and watch some videos of some top level strongmen. Like Eddie's got great stuff out there. Eddie Hall, he's got some great stuff out there just on what he ate. And that's
what's he eating?
Like, he's eating like 12,000 calories a day, or was.
How do you do that?
That's mental. I don't know. Honestly, don't. Like, even Big Zadrunas, he wasn't as big a eater as Eddie. But Big Zadrunas says he's 10,000 calories a day when he was in his prime, you know. 10,000 calories a day. Do you know what that is? Like, if you're eating 6 meals a day, that's 1,500 calories.
I mean, just to manage that, to make the time to eat that.
Yeah. And it's like, people like these guys, these top level guys, they're eating what a normal person would eat in a day. They're eating in a meal. Yeah. 6, 7, 8 times a day, whatever you need to get in to get it in.
It's probably near almost a week's food for some people in a day.
And it's not just like putting this food away. Like, what I realized is you've got to really, really, really be driven to eat that food, because you've got to tell yourself mentally that you need to eat that. Like, you need to eat that to survive. Like, because that's what food is. It's to help you survive. Yeah. But at this point, you're way past surviving. Like, you're way past that. You're just like the superhuman now. And 150 kilo, I'm speaking from 150 kilo, trying to eat 7,000 calories a day. It consumed my life. Like, it just as soon as you wake up to as soon as you're going to sleep, am I eating enough?
So what can I eat? What's breakfast?
For a lot of years, It was actually stuck with a shake that Cherry gave me, the cherry bomb.
All right, okay.
That was what I called it.
What's in the cherry bomb?
The cherry bomb. I'd have to get the list now, but it was yogurt, eggs, blueberries, and just a lot of, not blueberries, but berries, just a lot of some fruit, yogurts, protein powder. Oh, just a massive amount of stuff, and it would make about 2 liters a shake, and I would. When I was getting up to work and going to work for my father-in-law, I would get up and I would get up about 5:30, 5:45, straight down to the kitchen and blend that up, and I would chug that before I left the house, and that was at 6 a.m. And at that point, when I was solid in my routine, eating like that solid, it's 3 hours. Every 3 hours I'm eating. 6, 9, 12, 3, 6, 9, bed.
Were you beginning to dread eating? Were you sick of it? Or?
Yeah. Towards the end, like that's really what I was struggling with the most. Like, because when your mental fortitude goes on the food and you just start slipping on the food a little, training's just not there. You just don't have that pop in your lifts anymore. Like when you're not force feeding yourself and you, the pop in your training, the recovery is just not there. Like you've just got to be constant on food and energy. If your body sags just a little bit in energy, it take you a week to recover that back, and it, because you're so big and you're going through so much energy, like it just has a massive effect. Like if you're not, steadily eating your meals every day, like,
do you notice your weight drops quite quick as well if you don't eat enough?
Oh yeah, like, well, I remember, my wife will remember too. I had a massive go at my wife because her family own a nursery, and she was working in the nursery at the time, in the office with her sister, and she'd taken home a virus. Nursery, like the virus is going about nursery all the time. Like she'd taken home this virus, right? And I was like just starting out on my plough to getting bigger and stronger and getting into the sport, and she'd taken this virus home and given me the cold, and I remember looking at the scales being 120, and then like by the end of that week I was like 112, and I was going skeppy at her. I was like, if you bring home another virus again, you're going to stay with your mother, like it was pretty mega. And obviously then you start to realize that, man, your weight and your water weight and stuff, like it fluctuates a lot, and just give me a good understanding about how your weight, how your body weight is, how it can be very variable.
It's something I totally understand the weight management and the focus there, because you remind me of when I was trying to keep my weight down for boxing, and you're always trying to be at the bottom weight. You're trying to be as lean as you possibly can. And I used to monitor this, almost starve myself, to be honest. I didn't realize at this time that this is what I was doing. And one Christmas, my girlfriend at the time, her granny gave me a Christmas present that included a chocolate bar.
Oh yeah.
And I was I didn't say it, but I was so offended.
I was gonna say what you.
How could she do that to me? How could she knowingly give me a chocolate bar? And in my head, I've got all these crazy thoughts. I'm like,
I knew some bodybuilders like that.
She wants me to lose. That's why she's done that.
These are the things that when you're starving and you're hungry and stuff like that, and like normal people just don't get it. Like normal actions can like have such an effect on your head.
Yeah. I think people, like anyone who's just going about their day-to-day life and they don't understand your goals, it's totally innocent of them, but to you it means so much. And if they don't understand what you're trying to achieve, it can come across the wrong way, I think.
For sure, yeah. Well, I think a lot of people seem like that. Like if you explained on paper what strongman is and what it takes to be, why would you do that?
Yeah.
Why would you do that? You know what I mean? Like it takes a lot of food and a lot of guts and training, you know what I mean, to get there.
Yeah, you probably have to be pretty obsessed.
Oh, definitely. But like any sport, like if you want to be good at something, like if you want to be good at something, you have to be truly immersed in it, and you have to do it for a long time. Like I like to put things down. I did strongman for about 6 or 7 years. I would say that was me. I would say I'd done an apprenticeship in it, and I was starting to learn a few things. That's as far as I got. I would say if you're not putting 5 years into something, I would say you don't know much about it. You know what I mean?
Yeah.
Because training to be a carpenter takes you 4 years. Training to be a joiner or a plumber takes you 4 years.
Aye.
So you want a trade or anything like that, a profession that you can charge a lot of money for an hour. It's going to take you 5 years to learn, to learn that trade. So, it takes a minute to really to learn a few solid things in strongman, just like any sport.
Yeah. There's some sports I always think that are like so bonkers. Like, you know how you're talking about taking time to learn. Have you ever seen those guys that do the wingsuit?
Oh, yeah. How do you learn? How do you practice that?
Well,
You know what I mean?
when do you find out you're no good at it?
Yeah, well, yeah.
Do you know? Like I just there is some sports. Another one, and I really want to get on the podcast is a free diver, because that sport fascinates
I was just
me.
a way to say, like, diving's got to be in there. Like, there's a documentary on Netflix just now about the free divers. You should watch it if you've not seen it.
Yeah, I love stuff like that.
And it's about some of the females that try to break the world record, and it's nuts. Like, it's nuts.
Yeah.
Like, me and my wife actually had a funny conversation. It's like, imagine trying to get athlete insurance for that sport. Like, by the way, I'm just going to dive down about 100 meters with no oxygen.
Oh my goodness.
And there's nobody around me because they can't swim as fast as me. So there's literally nobody there. And don't worry, if I'm going to pass out, it'll be from about 10 meters from the surface. So it's...
Did you see the one with a woman that did the swim under ice in cold water? It was also on Netflix.
Oh, no, I didn't see that one.
She went, it was the longest swim under ice. It was a world record. And she held her breath. I think so the record was previously 95 meters underwater on one breath. And this is in freezing cold water. And she got to 100, I think it was 112 meters. But when you're watching it, you're almost struggling for breath yourself watching it.
Yeah. It's, well, when I was watching it, they were explaining you get down to a certain, you have to swim for a certain depth.
Yeah, and then
after about
you lose
20,
points.
yeah, after about 20 meters or so, the pressure changes and it starts sucking you down.
Yeah.
That is terrifying. What happens if you miss the rope at the bottom? Like, you're just straight, like...
You know, one of the things that they have to do is they have to train to get past the riggers, where the riggers is where your body starts shaking.
Oh, yeah. Because you're running out of oxygen.
Yeah. And that's like, I mean, I'm linking that to strongman, because you must have to get to a point where your body's just saying no, but you have to say, no, I'm going to make you do this.
Well, yeah, like, thankfully, well, I never blacked out or passed out in my time. I used to maybe over obsess about some conditioning and things like that. Like, I never wanted to be seen needing an oxygen mask or anything like that. I didn't like that. It was for me, it was almost a bit of a sign of weakness. I'm not saying that is, but I'm just saying, like, if my competitors in the back see me with oxygen on, they're like, oh, he's tired now, magic, I'm gonna get him the next one.
Yeah.
And there was a couple of times at UK's, I don't know if it was caught on camera, but like, I'm slapping the oxygen, like, just like tapping it off, like, get that off of me, like, I don't want that.
Yeah.
So I always used to try and obsess about the conditioning, but I get it. Like, some of these big guys, like, I was only ever 156 kilo, and that sounds big, but that's not, like, I always said entry level a world's strongest man's 160 kilo. Like, if you're not 160 kilo, you're just not going to do well. Like, you need to have that size and the capacity to hold calories. Like, over a week, you need like, the big framed guys are the boys that do well because they can take in so much calories and they can stockpile, if you like, you know what I mean? The bigger guys. And I understand when you're in Malaysia and you're 180 kilo and there's no humidity and you've done a truck pull. I get it, bro. Take some oxygen.
yeah. It must be so hot, and actually, like, managing your weight or your eating and weight in an area, a place like that where you go out, different climate, very hot, you're probably burning calories a lot faster, and exhaustion, sweating
sitting doing nothing. Well, at 156 kilos, me sitting doing nothing, I need 4,000 calories a day. These guys are world's strongest man in Malaysia, sweating at like 40 degrees. Like, those guys are going through calories, and not just calories, but salt and electrolytes. Like, they're just like a walking, like, they're just walking super freaks, man. Like, from my understanding, being that size, you need constant nutrition. It's just like a constant force feed of water, electrolytes, and food.
How long can you stay at the top? How long can these guys remain at that level and live like that?
It's all changing. It's all changing. You know, it all comes down to what you've done in the past, what your training's been like. You know what I mean? Like, I'm sure Eddie Hall will tell you himself, like his journey was never based on longevity. It was based on an outcome.
Yeah.
Whereas guys like Zydrunas Viscus and Brian Shaw, like you could say their training was clever, and it maybe wasn't based on longevity, but it has appeared that the fact that they're still mega strong in their 40s.
Yeah.
Yeah. And if they entered any World Masters strongman competition, if one or the other wasn't there, they'd be winning it still.
Right.
Like, that's how strong these guys still are. Like, Zydrunas and Shaw can still compete in Worlds and get into the final. So, and they're in their 40s now. So some of the top level guys, like, they are still going on. Like, they've been doing this since Zydrunas has been a world champion powerlifter since his early 20s.
Yeah. But I mean, it can't be good for you long term in life to remain at that size and weight. Is there a point where you have to say, right, I need to get my body weight down and reduce what I'm doing here?
Of course,
the strain on the body.
I think everybody comes. I think when you spend a life that size, like even Zydrunas, he's still competing, but he spent a few years ago. He spent some time like losing weight and trimming down. Man, like he was like 40 at that point. And like within 6 months, he looked like a bodybuilder, like more commonly known in Britain. Terry Hollins did it. Like he was super big. Like there was a photo of him online that he said that he hated him. He's seen himself and he's like, man, I've got to change this. And then he literally dropped a pile of body weight and, you know, 6-pack on stage bodybuilder. Like that's impressive. Like that's, you know, like, you've went from the total opposite, you know.
I wanted to ask you there actually. It's just to explain to people the difference between a bodybuilder and a strongman, because bodybuilders look awful strong, right? But you never see a guy looking like that in strongman.
Happily explain that, because that is probably one of the biggest misconceptions of the sport. You know, people look at you and just go, "Oh, big, he's been at the gym, bodybuilder." No, absolutely not. Like it's a totally different type of athlete. It's a totally different sport. We train totally different. And if you put a normal 6-foot-odd strongman, like that's been to Worlds just a couple of times, I'm not even talking about an elitist, I'm just talking an average world's strongest man, you put him next to the biggest bodybuilder you've ever seen, and he will dwarf that man. He will dwarf the bodybuilder. It's a completely different type of training. The bodybuilder's goal is to make the muscle big, but not in an actual way that it's supposed to function properly. Whereas strongman are completely functional. We don't do stuff to look better. We do stuff that will make us lift more. So everything around our frame is built to be harder, is built to be more sturdy to like forces from different angles. So like our hips are bigger, wider, our stomachs are bigger and thicker. But people's like, oh, well, you're just fat. Well, go and look at Eddie Hall when he won, and then go and look at Eddie Hall after he lost some weight. And there's a big 6-pack just waiting under that big fat belly.
You know, you can see it though. His stomach looks so hard.
But what I can't believe is people genuinely think they're fat. It's like, you think they're just fat, do you? Like, are you mental? What do you think's lifting that 1,000 pounds? You know what I mean? So when some of these massive men drop a little bit of weight, you're like, oh, he could be a bodybuilder. And like Eddie threatened about standing on stage, but I think he's just too thick, you know. But
did you watch the fight that Eddie Hall had with Thor?
I did, yeah. I did watch it, yeah.
Because he lost a lot of weight, Thor, didn't he?
He did, yeah. Thor did, in my opinion, quite well for a 160 kilo guy. He lost a bit of weight for that. Eddie obviously lost a bit of weight as well, but Thor looked like he put in a good bit of training towards it. It's not easy being, you know, he was 205 kilos at his heaviest. Like, Aye. To come to like people don't understand. Just go to your local gym, put on a pair of boxing gloves, and put on your phone and go and do 2-3 minute rounds. Just not swinging aggressively. Just hit that bag for 3 minutes, have a minute off, and then go for another run. And you'll start to understand just how hard that is. Moving around and then think there's another equally as big guy throwing punches at you too.
Yeah.
And that's hard fitness. That is a completely opposite type of fitness. It's what I'm experiencing now, but it's a completely opposite type of fitness, you know. it was impressive to see him and managed to move like that for so many rounds, you know.
Yeah, so let's on that. You've stepped into the world of gladiatorial sports, Paul, yourself.
Yes,
You're getting into
yes.
jiu-jitsu, right?
Yeah, it helps me keep a rein on some stuff. We're getting choked
Okay.
out a few times a week, you know.
Okay.
But yeah, I've obviously since stopping strongman, I realised with strongman that it took up my entire life. And when I stopped strongman, I'm happy that I stopped strongman. But I was like, what am I supposed to do all this time? Like, people used to say to me for my whole career, like, how do you have time for that? How can you be bothered doing that? And I'd be like, well, it just happens. Like, I've got loads of time to do it. I'll just have to just make time. And then when strongman stops, you're like, I genuinely spent every minute of the day thinking about training, thinking about what I was doing that night at training. If I wasn't training, was I stretching? If I wasn't stretching, was I at physio? If I wasn't doing any of that, was I eating? You know what I mean? Like, it was just an endless amount of, stuff to think about. And you come away thinking, man, I need something else to think about. Mm-hmm. So obviously I left strongman because of health reasons, and I wanted to focus a bit more on my life and my family's life. I've got a son and a business that needs to be run. And so I was like, what am I going to do? Now, I don't like getting punched or kicked, and I don't like, because I'm always been a big guy, I don't like the idea of being trained to punch and kick people either, because I just feel that's in a situation of confrontation, I'm going to be more liable to punch or kick someone in defense. Mm-hmm. So I always quite liked the idea of jiu-jitsu, and I was quite flexible anyway. I was always quite a flexible strongman, so I was like, this could pair well. So I went down to Dundee, and I'm doing jiu-jitsu at Gracie Baja in Dundee. Shout out to the guys down there. So yeah, like, I'm starting to understand a bit more of the fighting world, you know what I mean? I'm not saying jiu-jitsu's fighting, but it's a bit more of, as you say, the gladiatorial sort of like one-on-one sort of learning techniques, you know?
I don't know anything about jiu-jitsu, but I think I'm right in saying this. Size doesn't necessarily mean it's an advantage.
No, and that's why, again, mentally it was easy to lose all my size, because I walked into Gracie Baja and my coach Val, he's 70 kilos soaking wet, and he's like, I'll say 5'8", so he's not, if he watches this, he doesn't hurt me. I'll say 5'8", and I was 120 kilos, 6'5", a big guy. I have respect for people. I don't look down at people. It's like, you're small, I could have you. I don't think that at all. But you've got no idea just how helpless you are until you get put on a mat with a brown belt, even just a brown belt, you know what I mean? Like, it's not a black belt who's been doing it in competition for 15, 20 years. This is a guy who's been doing it for 10 years. He's got his own place, and he's an ex-MMA fighter as well, so he knows how to punch and strike and stuff. He just doesn't. And until a 70-kilo man holds you down and you can't do nothing, you're like, what's the point in being this weight? What is the point in being 120 kilo? And they're starting to realize now, some of the big strong men are going to have a little roll with Gordon Ryan and stuff like that, and they can't do nothing with him. They can't, and he's 100 kilo, and these guys are like Gordon Ryan swept big Hafthor Bjornsson like he was nothing, and it's like that Hafthor was on top of Gordon, and it's like almost twice the weight, and before you know it, Gordon's on top, big guys on the bottom, and it's just like, how did he do that? And
fold start up like a cardboard box.
I just think it's amazing. So size doesn't matter, no. And again, size helps. It's going to help. Once I've got a bit of knowledge, it's going to help me hold you down. But like, if you're untrained and you're walking around like, don't think you're safe because you're big. Yeah. that's not.
But you enjoy the discipline of it, Paul. Like
absolutely, yeah.
Do you see yourself competing?
It's something I've thought about. It's obviously been in the back of mind. I'm internally competitive to see how well I can do in things. I never set out to try and win stuff. Even now, looking back on strongman, it was never really about winning competitions. It was just about just trying to see how good I could be at something. And it's the same in jiu-jitsu. I like to see how well I can do. You know what I mean? But going back to, I mentioned to you earlier, it's a bit of Dr. Jekyll and Mr. Hyde situation. You know, when you go to compete, that's sort of what it turns into. And there's a lot of things to go along with competing. You know, if I start to look at how can I do better, it just starts to swallow up your life again. You know what I mean? And I've just come out of 8 years of that. You know what I mean? Of my entire life just being completely focused on one aspect of, you know, training or eating or strongman. And I come out the back of it, and it's nice to be able to spend time with my family. And I'm not well today, so don't need to go to jitsu tonight or whatever. And it's also nice to just have something regular in my life that doesn't demand. There's no social media. There's no other pressures, outside pressures, other than just learning and having fun. And plus, it's super useful for self-defense. You know what I mean? Like, that's one of the biggest reasons. Like, I started it. You know what I mean? I like the idea of being self-defense because, you know, even just and it's not even about being physical. If someone comes up to you and they're having a bad day and they start like screaming and losing their temper at you, you can remain more calm because you sort of understand that you're safe because you've got some measurable, you know, skills.
I actually, this is something I've always thought that people who are the most dangerous are the ones that actually don't feel safe. People who don't feel safe tend to be a bit more aggressive because
that's their way of like, it's making themselves look bigger than, you know, the problem. It's like trying to fend off the bear, isn't it? Like, you're trying to make yourself look big, you know. Yeah. But in actual fact, the bear turns around, you're kind of done. It's kind of like that. And I've learned a lot from Jordan Peterson as well, like a lot of controversial character, but I've learned a lot from Jordan Peterson, and he talks a lot about, you know what I mean, you can't be a good man until you realise how dangerous you can actually be. And
I've seen them talking about that.
And then learn to control it. And that's probably one of my biggest things that I took away from strongman, actually, is how to control that aggression. And it's as you start to self-reflect more, I seen that a lot in school. I was told that was a bad thing to be that way, to be aggressive or this or that. And there was many years of people trying to like contain that sort of like side of me that was always fiery. I was always a fiery young person, and I'd never liked anyone speaking to me in a certain way. And you know what I mean? Like, I had a short fuse.
I can imagine jiu-jitsu's been a real leveler, though. I mean, you're talking about your coach there just folding you up, and he's half the size. And you know, when moments like that, you just think, oh, hang on a minute here. I'm not strong, not as big as I thought. You know, all of a sudden here's this little guy with the knowledge, and this. I think the crazy thing nowadays.
I just stop you there. I never called him a little guy.
No, okay.
I never called him. I never coach Val
on the record.
Coach, I never called you little.
But like nowadays, with the way that MMA is now, there's so many clubs popping up everywhere. Every second guy, every second man or woman is doing some sort of martial art now, and you just have no idea.
Yeah,
you have no idea who you're coming across in the street.
For sure. Yeah, and it's a great thing because, in my opinion, if people are always understand there could be an underlying threat of me touching you, there's going to be more conversation. There's going to be less chance of people getting hit. If there's always the underlying, between, you know, it's said, you know, between males, there's always an underlying threat of violence, and that's generally why males, you know, can control themselves, and there's respect amongst, like, you've been in boxing, you've been amongst boxers and stuff like that. You know, when you're in a group of boxers and stuff, everything's amicable because they know you talk to me like that, and there's, you know, we're gonna go outside and we're just gonna sort it out, or we're gonna go and spar or whatever, and there's that behind it.
You know, some boxers are the quietest people you've ever met. Yeah. They're so quiet.
So are some of the big strong men. Yeah. Like honestly, it's like some of those massive guys, some of the nicest guys you'll ever meet. You know what I mean? Yeah. Like, it's more so when you start getting up to the higher levels. Like, the higher levels are really, some of them are toppers of guys. You know.
You can see. I don't know if you see this in jiu-jitsu, but sometimes there will be. And you can see it in boxing. Anyone who's a boxing fan or goes to a club and knows this, right? Sometimes in a club or in a ring, and this normally happens in clubs. It doesn't happen in fights, or it does happen in fights, but you'll see that there will be a disagreement between two men, right? And it almost there's almost nothing said. It's settled in a sparring session.
Yeah,
you know, and That is the end of it normally.
No,
you know?
I can actually attest to actually saying I've never had any. Oh, I've not seen anything like that. I've had my own incidents over a year and a half where, somebody's put a submission on me and it's hurt, and I really didn't like it. But I've tried to take away when I'm in there, because I've never been good at dealing with others. Like and that, another good reason why I'm in there. So when I've been hurt, I've tried to just come away from the situation, just keep going, like just finish the role, try to be amicable, and go away and assess the situation. And normally when I do that, I see that it was my fault that I got hurt. It wasn't like, yes, he was going for a submission, but it's because I didn't know what to do next to defend that I got hurt. I got a knee in the face or I got an elbow and stuff because I moved the wrong way. It was actually my fault, not his. But at the time, you could get up like, why did you do that? Why? There was no need for that. But if you don't do that, try and reflect a little bit, especially on the road home, because I go to Dundee, so I got a 40-minute drive on the way home, especially got my ass kicked. I got a lot of time to reflect. So you often see that it was your own mistakes. Same in boxing. You know what I mean? Somebody catches you a good one, catch it on video, it's probably because you moved the wrong way. You know what I mean? It's probably your fault, you know?
Let me tell you, when you get hit with a real heavy shot,
it stuns you.
You just think that I can't ever let that happen again.
Yeah.
What happened there? You're all over the place. You're not thinking straight. You're hurt, and you just think to yourself, right, that can never happen again, because you can't just take shots like that.
Yeah, for sure.
It is one of these things, like there's guys, I mean, there's people who I had boxed in the past who you look at them, and I'm thinking of one person in particular. This guy came in and he was just like overweight, and he said he hadn't trained or whatever in a long time, and I didn't know about his past, and I was so fit at this time, and I thought this will be a breeze. We're going to do a little bit of sparring here, and anyway,
you a good one.
Well, we're sparring, we're moving around the ring, and I just never saw it coming. He bounced me off the ropes. And just poleaxed me with a straight left. It was like an absolute ramrod in the face. And
from a big guy.
I don't think I've ever been hit so hard in my whole life, and I was like, what the fuck? Like that was painful. And how did that happen? And I got chatting to him afterwards. And so it was the first time I'd met this guy. And it turns out that he was a 6-time Scottish champion as a youth.
Oh yeah. So he did have a bit of movement in him.
He had movement, but he had knowledge. You know
where you were going to be next.
Yeah. What a leveler though. And you just think, there's heaps of people like that lurking about.
Oh, definitely.
You look at him, you think, he's not much. He's a bit unfit, but what a knowledge.
I'll put a mention in one of the most unsuspecting guys I know. We both know him. You actually box him. You're a bit of a partner with Mark.
Mark, yeah. Mark,
he's such a nice guy, such a great guy. But I would not be putting on a pair of boxing gloves to get in the ring with either of you two guys. Absolutely not.
No. Well, listen, I probably only last now about 60 seconds.
Well, that's 45 more than me.
Yeah. Oh, well, I haven't been down to the club in ages, but I enjoy it. Like, I do enjoy sport boxing. I love it.
It's a bit of one of those the sport of boxing. It's why I've been drawn to jiu-jitsu. It's real world feedback. You know what I mean? Like, you do something wrong, you have a good look at it. Probably yourself, you got to look and work on. And it's actually, I used to think, why are more people not into the gym? And coming away from strongman and realizing, like, you have a lot of time to think about who you are as a person, how you go about your routine, your life, and if you're not focused on like trying to be better in your life, like I wasn't strongman, I was trying to focus on what I'm going to eat next, what I'm doing in my routine. I realize coming out of the back of it, it's like if I didn't have that there and you're just in the gym, not only do you feel lost, but man, like things start to become really negative for you because you're not really focusing on.
Yeah, Paul, I find that the hardest thing.
You know what I mean?
That's the biggest difficulty I ever have in the gym is that I don't have a goal.
Yeah.
There's no, like a sport, boxing, strongman, jiu-jitsu, you have a goal.
Yes.
Ultimately, you may compete in jiu-jitsu, but like that for me, if I go to the gym and I don't have a goal, I just can't get motivated, you know?
And I'll be honest, like I own a gym, and since I stopped strongman, the gym motivation has not been there. Like I've had to drag myself to the gym, make sure I'm going, make sure I'm going once a week. But I actually still use a lot of my warm-up routines. I just go in and do my warm-up routine from Scott Strongman. And it actually makes me feel very like loose and limber again. And it's also, I know when I think about competing in jiu-jitsu, I'll go straight to the gym. I'll be straight into the gym to do more work in the gym to help me in jiu-jitsu.
Jiu-jitsu, yeah.
But it's definitely something like you're walking a little bit of a mental haze if you're trying to get started in the gym. If you're that person that started a gym membership and you've been there for a couple of months and you just don't go back, like you need to ask yourself why that is really. Like, why did I not go back there? Like, what am I trying to achieve? Because you're going to go through endless amounts of those things. It's not going to be the gym. It's not going to be boxing. It's not going to be this. It's not going to be anything until you actually figure out what you're trying to do. Like, because just going to the gym for half an hour, that just sucks. You know what I mean? Like, but all these people that are in their routine, like the mum trying to get fitter, she knows what she's in there for. She goes in, she's limited on time, she jumps on a few machines and she gets out the door again. And these women are in good shape. Again, like the people that are sort of lost, just like try and have a fitness goal. Going up Ben Nevis or something, you don't have to enter a competition. There's loads of like just events.
Yeah, that's me. But Paul, I would probably try and do something like, rather than go up Ben Nevis, I'd say, right, my
Master
goal
Scottish
needs to be climb Mount Kilimanjaro. It would be far too big. And then I scunner myself in the gym and I'm like, I'm not getting there.
Again, like I got immersed into strongman because it's something that I enjoyed. And then same with jiu-jitsu. I like that the type of fitness that it makes you have. You've got to be mobile for it. You've got to, I've been doing it a year and a half now, so I'm now a GB2. So your rounds are longer. You're starting to get 6 to 10 minute rounds, with no stopping, and I've managed to do a few of those things. So I like the aspect of the fitness and the mobility of it, and also like it can be a very healthy sport because you don't need to be 160 kilo to be a world athlete in it. In fact, the best guy in the world, the GOAT, if you like to say, in no gi is Gordon Ryan. He's like 105 kilo, so you don't need to be massive for the sport. And that's a big appeal to me right now, you know what I mean?
Let me ask you something about, just jiu-jitsu, and you're looking at him as a role model, right? But would you want to compete in jiu-jitsu, or would you ultimately compete in mixed martial arts if you had the choice?
No, I would compete in jiu-jitsu.
Would you?
You want to know something? Like I've never been a fighter, but I understand the mentality and the training type it takes to be an MMA fighter. Because when people used to try and ask me what's the difference between strongman and powerlifting, I used to try and say it's like boxing and MMA. It's exactly the same as that. They're both forms of lifting, but there's only one real type of lifting, and there's only one real type of fighting in the world, and that's MMA. Like there's only one. Many people want to say it, but there's only one real fighting sport, and that is MMA, because every other sport has got designated rules that you can't do stuff. Now, give or take a couple of things in MMA, kicking in the nuts, eye gouging, 12-6 elbows, or kneeing someone on the ground, everything can be used. People love to say in a street fight. People can say it. It's the most accurate thing there is to fighting. And strongman, apart from its size and weights, is the most accurate thing there is to actually lifting random heavy objects.
It is.
What I mean? And that's what it is. Like, that's why you're flipping cars and doing, you're not doing yoke runs with like, metal frames, and worlds are doing them with cars.
It's kind of like, like the Highland Games is a bit like that. They're throwing logs around. And why did you never do that? Why did you never compete in Highland Games? You'd have been good.
Yeah, it was, it's never something, I don't know. I never took off. I did do a Highlands Games. I did a local one in Auchinbleay, the Drumtochty Highland Games. I turned up one year because the rules are, if you own a kilt, you can enter. That is the traditional rule of Highland Games. So I turned up one year. Pardon me. I'd obviously messaged one of the boys and asked if it was okay to come up, and I turned up, no training whatsoever. I just turned up for the crack, you know what I mean? It turned up for a bit of fun. There's a bit of awkwardness, you know what I mean? Because I was a big strong man and folk just thought, it's the same as walking into a new gym. Folk just thought, this guy's big and strong and he thinks he's just going to come in here. I knew fine well that was difficult. I knew fine well that the Highland Games is super highly technical. I wasn't there to win. I was just there to have a bit of fun. And I knew there was one event that I was super good at, but I messed it up a bit on the day. And that's weight for height. I know I'm good for weight for height because that does take power and explosiveness. And I had that. Hafthor Bjornsson actually holds the overall world record, not in Highland Games, but the overall world record. He holds it at 22 feet. 22 feet, and I have no idea how that man does that. He sends that thing to the moon.
How heavy is the weight?
It's 22 pounds. I think 22 or 28, 22 or 28 pounds, one of the two. And it's just a solid lump of metal with a shackle on it. Yeah. And that day that I did the Highland Games, I just turned up to Dundalk Highland Games. I missed 15 and a half feet because it went up, but it didn't go over the bar. So it went up and over, and you get 3 attempts. And I don't know what happened, but I could not flick this thing over the bar because there was a bit of a flick just before you let it go, and it kept going straight up and straight down. It was going well high enough. And then there was a guy there called Lucas Venta. Actually, it's quite... if you're a strongman fan, Venta should mean something to you because Sebastian Venta was a world's strongest man. It was his brother. And this guy's... Lucas Venta's brothers in the Highland Games. It was actually quite good to meet him, you know what I mean? Just because it's a brother of a famous strongman. And he's actually a world-class Highland Games athlete. You know, he's really good. And he actually beat the games record on the weight for height, and it was like it was like 16'4", and he blasted it over. Obviously, won that event, and I was like, "Would you mind if I had a go just to see if I could get it over there?" Because I know I was close to getting 16 foot. So I stepped up. Everybody was sort of leaving, and I just blasted this thing. It had a bit of foot clearance on it too. I was like well over 17 foot.
Really?
Oh yeah.
Did it go over though?
Oh my, yeah.
Oh,
I was sailed right over. But at this point, I was well out of the show. I'd missed like a couple of throws ago, but missed that, and then I just sailed this thing. I was nowhere near the bar. There's a video of it somewhere, and it's just like it's upside down, and the handle's at least 12 foot from the bar.
Oh, man. If only the Guinness Book of Records were there.
But even in the world record, the Highland Games, like I think it's like 18 foot. So I'm doing well as like a world level Highland Games in one event.
In one event, yeah.
In one event.
Yeah, I mean, it's technical. Like the tossing the caber, it's like there's a lot of
highly technical.
Yeah,
like,
to actually get the thing to flip.
Yeah. It's all about timing, speed. Not so much speed, but timing, explosiveness, and you're on grass. Like, you're trying to carry this log. A couple of guys got to help you get the caber up. And the caber's standing on its feet. And then it's up to you to get the caber from the ground into your hands. Like, nobody lifts that into the hands for you. So there's a technique getting it off the floor. And that whole snatch off the floor, like, there's huge amounts of balance and skill in it. Not to mention just the weight. Like, you go and grab somebody out the crowd and get them to lift the caber flat off the floor. And I bet you most of the folk in the crowd will struggle. Like, just lifting it flat off the floor, let alone flipping it on its end. Yeah,
the hammer throw as well is that's highly technical.
Yeah. Another local world athlete, Bruce Aitken. He held the world record in hammer throw.
Okay.
I think it still sits actually.
Is it?
in the light in the light hammer throw. Yeah, it's one of the world records in the Highland Games.
That's really hard when you see them doing it, like because it's kind of like you're kind of rotating at a not just round in a circle. It's sort of like a
it is a circle, but it's an off-plane circle. You know what I mean? Like it's like it's off-plane. You know what I mean? It's not straight and it's not vertical. It's sort of like in a 45-degree angle. You know what I mean? And when you start to understand the mechanics of it, a lot of hip power, a lot of there's no shoulder power on it. And when you see some of the top Highland Games boys, they're not really that big in the shoulders. There are big guys and big shoulder guys, but some of the top guys that are like that aren't big in the shoulders. You know what I mean? Need more flexibility in the shoulders to get to like end the lever and stuff.
Do you know what's crazy about the Highland Games is that the Queen was such a big fan of the Highland Games. It just blows my mind. It's so bizarre that
Well, that's how we trained to defeat our army, so no wonder she's a fan.
But what a strange sport for her to be into, like not anything else. She's into Highland Games,
Yeah,
or she was.
It's a good tradition. It's a good traditional sport. You know what I mean? Like you still got like the hay toss and everything in there. Like there's some like just like old fashioned hard stuff to do. You know what I mean? Like people can relate to it. I think that's why people like strongman so much on the TV, because you can just relate to like. That's a car. I know it's a cut-out car, but that's still a car. You know what I mean? Like, or that's a big object, you know? And I think that's one of the negative sides of strongman. They've come away from that a little bit. It's like they've tried to get a 50-50 mix of obstacle and sport. You know what I mean?
Mm-hmm. It must be a good, a great job for the guy that designs the events, designs the disciplines to say, you know, what can we have here?
I'm pretty sure he wouldn't be yeah, it'd be a great job to come up with ideas, but he wouldn't be a popular man among the athletes. Right, boys, you're going to be pulling this plane today.
Yeah.
Fit?
I know. I saw a clip of this one event where this guy's holding a sword up to Jeff Cape's throat.
Oh, yeah.
Have you seen that?
No.
I mean, apparently there was a beef between them, but he had to hold the sword straight out in front of him, and Jeff Capes is standing there with the point at his throat. And
I didn't.
This is a ridiculous event. Why does Jeff have to stand there in the first place? You know,
I've actually not.
I think Jeff was to judge when the sword had dipped. You know, that was the idea.
Right,
he had to stand there to keep it completely straight.
The front hold. Yeah. Did that in Europe strong. Well, done on a few.
And what did you have to hold?
In Europe, it was a big hammer.
Right.
It was a big, like 30 kilo hammer. Like 30 kilos. Like, so when you're talking about the front hold, like Britain's strongest man, world's strongest man, it's a big hammer generally the giants have. You go and grab a bag of cement from your local hardware store.
Right,
and
say no more.
Put your bum and your shoulders on the wall, because that's the rule. You got to have your bum and shoulder on the wall. You got to hold that bag of cement a straight arm. You're allowed a little bend, like a little bend, and that is it. If they see you bending anymore, disqualified. If you're below the chin, disqualified.
How long can someone hold that?
Eddie Hall was actually the best at that because he had super strong shoulders and shorter arms, and he held. I think he got the world record. He was almost a minute. Almost a minute. I think my best with 30 kilos is about. I don't think I ever managed 40 seconds, but I was close.
Did you see that show, The Physical 100, on Netflix?
No, I didn't.
This is a brilliant show. It was like a Korean show, but they took 100 athletes from all different disciplines. There was like ice climbers, sprinters, long distance runners. There was gymnasts. There was strongmen.
Oh yeah,
and MMA fighters. And they came all the way through to like the last. They've whittled it down to like the last kind of. I think there was about 10 of them, and one of the elimination events was they called it the Stone of Prometheus, right?
Okay, that sounds
pretty,
cool.
Pretty
Sounds
grand.
good.
And so that it was a 50 kilo rock that had a net round it, and they had to lift it up onto their shoulder. There was 3 of them had to compete in this. They had to lift it up onto their shoulder, and the last one to drop it would qualify. This 50 kilo weight, and one athlete couldn't get it off the ground. There was 4 of them, right? There's 4 of them. One of them couldn't get it off the ground. There was a bodybuilder, and there was another guy who, I think he did MMA, and then there was a strongman. And the guy that was the strongman, he said, I love this kind of event. This is great, you know? And the strongman, he stood there for 2 hours.
With a stone.
The stone on his back. The other guy, the MMA guy, he was shaking.
Yeah.
You know, he was just shaking.
Mentally tough, though.
Rattling. Yeah, mentally tough to stand and hold it. But, you know, the other guy, the strong man, it just seemed just like it made for him.
Yeah.
But the next event, he had to chase.
Say no more, strongman's out.
Yeah, chase someone round a track.
Yeah, that's over.
And that was the end of him. Yeah, he couldn't do it.
That's the thing. Like, you sacrifice so much. Like, if you're the fastest man in the world, you're weak.
Yeah.
If you're strongest man in the world, like you're stiff as a board.
Yeah.
You know, so like it doesn't matter what end of the spectrum you're at of the extreme. You're giving up in massive areas and other bits. You know?
That was the kind of idea with that show, was they were trying to find out which type of fitness would be ultimately
the best across
the
all.
best. Yeah. I think, I can't remember, I think the guy that won it was a mountain rescue ice climber. I think that was his. He would have been good. Would have had probably good pound for pound strength.
Yeah.
Ultimately,
Can hang on stuff. He's used to like climbing, like really bodyweight stuff. You can do a lot of bodyweight stuff.
you would have been good at the final event in that, Paul, because the final event was a rope on a reel. You know, like it was like a big gym rope, right?
Oh yeah.
And all you had to do was just pull the rope in
Oh yeah.
until it was gone.
Well, actually, that was one of my best events. Was the arm over arm. That's what it's called. The arm over arm is basically like your truck pull, but instead of you being attached to the truck, you are sitting at the other end of the track and you're facing the truck, and you pull the rope and you pull the trucks towards you.
Mm-hmm.
And the last time I did it was in UK's Strongest Man, and nobody across 16 men finished it apart from me.
Wow.
Yeah, nobody even got close. Nobody even got 6 meters from the end, and I was the only one to finish it on that day. There's a meme out there about me about that one. That was the facials that I was pulling to get that finished. That was out. I don't know how I still had eyes left after that one. And that was a tough one.
Is that in the back or the biceps, or I mean
Fitness and grip, in your grip, and it was actually lashing a rain that day. So every time you pull on it, like you're 20 meters, so every time you pull and you go to readjust, like you reset to pull again, every time you reset, if you're good at it, you can keep some tension in the rope and sit up at the same time. And that's why nobody finished it that day, because nobody had that technique apart from me.
Mm-hmm.
And every time you sit back up, the rope hits the deck, and you could hear it slapping, like off the water. Like you could hear the water slapping off the deck.
Right, okay.
So the rope was soaking wet. It was like soaking wet. And then obviously not just wet, but it was heavy because it was soaking
That's
wet.
going to like probably double the weight of the rope.
Yeah, and then obviously because it's wet, the grip's crap. Like didn't matter what you had on your hands. Like there was what grips water better.
Yeah.
You know, so like that was just who had the best grip, and that was grip and technique that day, just because it was wet and there was nothing you could do to gain more grip. There was nothing you could put on your hands. That all just came down to technique. And I actually come off of that event. I actually got carried off of that event. That was probably one of the closest times I did come to passing out. And one of the legends of the sport, Mark Felix, he's like, "You've been watching me," and I was like, I actually have Mark, but yeah, Mark has a very similar technique. I didn't actually know he did that until he said that to me, and then when I watched him in arm over, I was like, "Oh yeah, me and him do the same thing actually," but not many people actually do it. So yeah, he actually noticed that and gave me a little nod at the end of the day. He's like, "Oh, you've been watching me." I didn't actually know that's what he did, but I realised it was after my best performance, and Mark actually saying like, "Oh, I didn't actually realise I had a specific little technique in there that made me a lot better at that event than."
Was that the year that you won the strongman?
No, that was the previous year where I got 5th actually.
5th. Who won that year?
I think it was. I think Pa Dwyer actually beat Lawrence Shalley for it. Lawrence Shalley was the big name that year, and I feel sorry for some of the big names coming to UK's Strongest Man, because it's got us all little, amateurs that are ready to bite at your heels and just take a scalp off anyone. You know what I mean? It's like, go and just send anyone in here just so we can, get our hands at them, just a chance to beat them. Because my first couple of years, Eddie Hall was there. Nobody was winning. Eddie just yawned out the power and he won. You know what I mean? He's just turned up, did a couple of events, and he just like smoked everyone. So when he wasn't there anymore, it was obviously at that point, like Eddie's on his way up. Like guy's got like 1,000 pound deadlifts. Like I've never seen anyone deadlift more than 400 kilo at the UK's Strongest Man. So like when it's a 400 kilo deadlift, Eddie's like, do I have to?
Aye.
Really? Like, and the organizer actually had to almost pay him to do the 400 kilo deadlift one year, just because like, the last guy was out at 380, and it's like, oh, there's a prize for, when in the end he ended up giving the 100 quid to the kids in the crowd or something. But he could almost like walk up with no belt, no nothing. He could just walk out the warm up area and just pull 400 kilo like it was nothing. Like he was going to pull 500. So yeah.
He's kind of transcended the sport a little bit, hasn't he, Eddie Hall? He's sort of got out with just strongman. He's known for all kinds of stuff.
Just a personality.
Yeah, personality, yeah.
Yeah, his time in strongman, I would say, definitely changed the sport as well. It's better or worse. It depends how you look at it. You know what I mean? In my opinion, before Eddie Hall, when it was like Brian Shaw and Hafthor Bjornsson and Big Z. I was always a massive Big Z fan. I always liked him. He when it was them guys, it seemed like it was the pinnacle, the three giants of the sport, with like 30 years of pedigree and many great champions, and you know what I mean, like such crazy feats of strength, and being able to, you know, achieve these feats of strength, what it takes, the training and the discipline throughout the year. And it just seemed like it was a great sport with a lot of pedigree. And then when Eddie come on the go, it seemed like it shifted a little to like more of a show of strength, more than a strength competition. Whether you like that sort of stuff, I'm sure it gained some popularity for a little bit of time.
Do you think he brought new fans to the sport? Or
I'm sure he did.
Yeah.
I'm sure he did. Like his fans, his social media was, you know, was broad, but you can't say he brought more fans in than Hafthor Bjornsson. He was a star of Game of Thrones. So like, as far as like fan base going, like I would say Hafthor had him fully beat there. You know,
how did their beef start? Like, how did they?
Two competitive men, mate. You know what I mean? Like two competitive men, and it just I don't know. It seemed to, I don't know. I couldn't tell you how it started, but it's obviously just two competitive men. They're two young men at the time when they're in Worlds. They're both in their late 20s. You know, they're both the youngest men there, and they're both massive. You know what I mean? Like Eddie's this powerhouse, you know, and Hafthor's, you know, this well-rounded sort of athlete, if you like, and you could see that in the boxing. You know, it was the same sort of in the boxing. Like Eddie's just a powerhouse, and Hafthor's the sort of more well-rounded athlete. You know what I mean? You've seen that in the strongman as well. And you know, granted, the year that Eddie won, there was massive controversy about, you know, what happened in the press and stuff like that. And granted, it didn't look great on Hafthor, but all that was just two competitive men trying to lay it down. You know what I mean? And I'm more of a Hafthor fan than an Eddie fan, but that was Hafthor's competition to lose, and he lost it. You know what I mean? Like Hafthor could moan about the pressing, but it's like you had 5 other events to beat him in, and the best one, some of your best events you didn't. So you can't, you know, that's what it is. You know, he beat you fair and square. So it was Hafthor's show to lose, and unfortunately lost that year. You know what I mean? But the whole beef was like that was just too competitive. I guarantee you there was fully worse between Brian Shaw and Big Z. Like, as competitive goes, like Hafthor and Eddie were nothing. Like, I would have loved to hear some of the arguments that two had over the years at, you know, World's Strongest Man, like that too. Like they were both, you know, Big Z's 6'4", 6'5", Big Shaw's like 6'10". Like these are both behemoths of men. Like they definitely argued in the competition. You know what I mean? Like of course you're gonna, it's gonna spill out. But
I love that they, you know, like see Eddie and Hafthor had a fight in a boxing match. It's like something that a little kid has dreamed up. What if the two strongest men in the world had a fight?
Had a fight.
Well, guess what? It's gonna happen. You know. I mean, it was such a freak show. Like it was just like. Eddie didn't belong in there. I didn't think he was. His arms were too short for Hafthor. You know, he just didn't. He was just not long enough.
For me, it was just a mismatch of skill. Like one looked like a reasonable amateur, and one looked like he'd never been in a boxing
Hafthor
ring in his life.
He definitely applied himself to his learning
for sure,
learning the sport.
Just like his footwork, his footwork just evading Eddie's ridiculousness. Like just kept his conditioning, you know what I mean? Like Rosetti's coming in with these big wild punches. You know yourself, once you've done a little bit of training, you've really focused, like you can miss these big punches quite easily.
You're not going to get hit by it. I mean, the thing is that the punches you get hit with are the ones you can't see. You don't see them coming, and when you see them a mile off, telegraphing, that's what they call it.
He had no setup, did he? He had no setup. And well, I'm starting to learn that in Jitsu now. You know, it's all very well knowing a move, but if you can't set it up, it don't mean nothing, you know what I mean? So if
you let the guy know you're going to do it, he's not going to let you. He's try and do everything to stop you.
Looking for the same thing all night. He's going to counter you, and he's going to do that to you. So, and that's what it kind of looked like in their boxing fight. But I liked it Because you know something, for the first thing, there's been all this shit talking. And you know something? They get to go in the ring and they get to hit each other in the face for a, you know what I mean? And actually, like, regardless
Settle
of...
it.
And actually settle it, yeah. And, you know, like, obviously it was for publicity and it was obviously for money. But at the same time, they two genuinely didn't like each other.
No.
So fine, go and have a fight.
Aye.
At least you've squared it like men instead of just bitching about it on the internet like what most people do now. It's if you've got something to say, if you're a fighter or not, if you've got something like negative to say to someone and you really want to sort it out, go down to your local gym with a set of gloves and go and have a spar with him. Like just go and, like there'll be a coach there, he'll happily let you get on with it. You know what I mean? Like and I would say that about jitsu too. Like if you've got an issue with somebody, just go and sort it out and you know, and you'll probably find it ends amicably.
Yeah, well,
anyway, in the end.
They say a boxing match is the best conversation two men can have, you know.
For sure, yeah, for sure.
Have a settle it and well, I don't know what the situation is with them now, if they are like...
I don't know, but I think they definitely learn some respect for each other. You know what I mean? Because you know yourself when you go to fight someone like that in a boxing ring, like it's just, there's nowhere to hide there. You're both in the ring on your own. Like you've got to defend yourself. Like so you get a bit of respect because for a start, they both made it to the ring. Like most people talk shit and just not even get there.
Yeah.
Like they're not even entertain the fact of getting physical with someone. You know what I mean? So respect to them for both getting in there and actually like starting to swing at each other because most people won't do it.
Especially with the power that those guys could distribute.
One punch.
Know? Oh my goodness.
One punch in the temple and it's sending you to the next realm, pal. Horrendous. But again, like you're an ex-boxer, you know for a fact, like you put either of them two in the ring, they're not touching you. You know, I mean, just because you've got a little bit of skill. Like
I would be on the move. The whole fight, I would be on the move. You know, I'd be moving. I would be, you know, definitely hit them. I think, like you know, like Eddie Hall, for an amateur fighter, because of his size, even for him to even hold a tight guard is difficult because he's
so big,
he's so broad, and to get to protect himself would be very difficult. And yet, I think if you were a sharp boxer, you'd pick him off. But that said, I definitely wouldn't want to box him because, like you say, if he gets you once, if he got you once. Good night.
What is it Wilder used to say when he was fighting Fury? It's like, you've got to do 30 minutes perfect. I only got to hit you once.
In a nutshell. It's in a nutshell.
But it's funny, like, that always sounds, I've only got to hit you once. Like, that's what I say to folk at Jitsu. I've only got to get you on top of you once. Aye, you try and get on top of him. You try and get on top of that guy. Like, he's not just not going to let you. Yeah. And it's like, McGregor, you know, he's only got to hit Mayweather once. Aye, well, you try and hit that guy once, you know what I mean? Like, it's always that, if I could just hit him once, and we're away to find out again with Fury and Ngannou, you know what I mean? It's like, he won't. He will not connect clean. He will not connect a headshot with a flush headshot with a boxer if you're not a time-served boxer.
When I look, you look at Mayweather, everybody he fought in his career, like Canelo, Hatton, Pacquiao, it was a who's who of the best fighters in history.
Yeah.
And then all of a sudden, everyone thinks that Conor McGregor can knock him out with one punch. Like,
did well, the guy, 10 rounds, but
the guy. No. There's a reason he's called Pretty Boy Floyd Mayweather. He came out of boxing without a scratch on him. You know, the guy doesn't get hit,
and he's still fighting now. Like even though he's fighting like exhibition fights, like
who could blame him?
Like but he's still doing what he loves. He's still getting to box, and he's going in with no pressure. He's getting an absolute ton of money, and he's just getting to box cans. You know what I mean? He's just getting to go into and you're done.
Turn up, box nobody, and come away with 14 million or something.
But he still gets. But he obviously loves boxing, and he wouldn't still be doing that. He wouldn't still be going like. You understand yourself, even if you're doing like a little charity fight, you're going to get nervous. Yeah, like doing something small, like. You put yourself into that, you're going to get nervous, you know?
I'm glad he does it. Like, see, as a boxing fan, it's good to see him still, like, just to see him in the ring and the skills that he's got, because he was such a joy to watch. I hated him when he was making his way up. I always thought someone was going to beat him, and they never did. And then it was towards the end of his career, I thought, actually, this guy is brilliant. He's incredible.
You ever notice nobody likes the current champion?
No, I know. You always think there's someone's going to beat him.
Schumacher. Yeah. So Sullivan and Snooker.
I know.
Nobody likes them when they're around, but then when they stop, they're like, man, that guy was amazing.
Yeah.
You know?
I definitely appreciate Mayweather. Like now, when you actually think the quality of the opponent that he fought was just so high.
Yeah.
And yet he came out of the sport with a face. He doesn't have a mangled nose or, he's got his brain cells about him.
Yeah. He's not punch drunk or nothing. Like he's literally... he is literally the epitome of boxing. Like he is the epitome of boxing. Like hit and don't get hit.
The blueprint.
Yeah,
you know, you would think
hit and don't get hit. You know, and he didn't have to knock people out. He just had to touch them in the face to infuriate them enough. They just couldn't hit him. So
I think he did used to knock people out until
he had some hand issues.
Yeah,
or something.
Hand problem. He had hand
soft
problems,
hands
I
or
think,
something.
and I think
They had to start watching what he was doing. He had to watch what he's doing and he kept breaking it or something, didn't he?
yeah. Apparently, when he was fighting Hatton, he was saying to Hatton on the inside, he was saying, they told you I couldn't hit hard, didn't they? You know, and I think Hatton was in shock at this point because he was like, you know, this guy can hit.
But again, the reason why Hatton was in shock is because like he was getting hit with things that he couldn't see. You know what I mean?
Yeah.
Hatton was too focused on hitting him. Floyd caught, where'd that come from? You know what I mean? So that's why the knockout of Hatton was so profound, because Floyd just kept hitting him with things that he didn't see, and it was just a couple of levels above Hatton. Hatton was a great fighter, one of arguably the best fighters in Britain's produced, but again, just a tough that's a tough match. Like Floyd was levels above, and it was showed, you know what I mean? Because it's just like little shots, you're like, that didn't look like much, but I bet you that hurt. And those little shots on the inside, you know yourself, like they chip away at people's mentality. Like you just know that. You're like, where did that come from? How did he hit me there? Like getting hit from stuff in positions that you've never been tested in. You're like,
and when you start getting picked off, it's very frustrating. You're like, oh man, that hurt me there, and you don't know how to stop it.
The issue.
You don't know how to stop it.
Yeah.
You know,
it makes it worse, doesn't it? Because you're now frustrated. Now you can't think about what they're doing. Whereas if you just, I'm starting to learn that when someone pins you in jiu-jitsu, if you just relax, like it's the best thing you can try and do. And again, it's just one of those good about the gladiatorial sports. You know what I mean? Like going fighting, you got to learn to relax. You know what I mean? Like because you put in a lot of bad situation, you get flashed with a shot you don't know. You know, somebody takes your back or takes you down that you don't know. You've got to stay calm. You know, you've got to try and keep your head in that first, 10, 20 seconds, or that's where you end up finding that you make your fatal mistake. You know what I mean? And that can be applied to a lot of things in life, you know.
Do you think, so Paul, like the future for you, what's the future? Are you going to focus on jiu-jitsu? Do you see yourself getting involved in strongman again, training people for strongman, or in any way?
I don't know. There's not too much. Again, I'm from a sleepy little village in the northeast of Scotland. You know, it's not like it's not like CrossFit. It's mainstream. You know what I mean? Like strongman's a very niche sport. If someone, there is a young lad in the gym that he wants to do a bit of strongman, so he's just got to keep training and putting in the time. But it's a tough sport. Like so, I'm happy to train anyone if anyone wants a bit of help, a bit of knowledge to try and get set down in even any strength sport. If you need any help coaching and fitness, I did some work with your boxers and things like that.
You did a great job with Hayden. It was brilliant.
So and a lot of people would find it strange. Why did you put a boxer at a strongman? But you obviously seen the results yourself.
Yeah.
From a person that held the pads from him. You know what I mean? And
yeah, because you didn't train him to be a strongman. You conditioned him, which was great. And what a difference.
Yes.
I mean, I've never seen someone's body change the way Hayden changed.
Yeah. Didn't sacrifice his fitness though, did it?
No.
Made it better.
No. Oh yeah.
Because you learn how to work with the VO2. You know what I mean? You're sort of your body learns how to process oxygen differently. You know what I mean?
Paul,
for a longer period of time and things. So.
Let me tell you. I mean, so for people listening, Hayden was this like 14-year-old kid coming in, and I would get in the ring and spar with him for 45 minutes non-stop, and just to help him build up and train. And then when he started training with you, the 45 minutes sparring
down a little bit.
No, it stopped. Completely. I mean, the guy was hitting so hard.
Yeah.
And there was Marines coming down, there was big strong guys coming down the club, and he's bashing lumps out of them.
Good.
And he's a kid, and I was looking and thinking, man, he is strong. So strong.
And it's that was just a testament to the type of training that I was doing. You know what I mean? Like that training, yes, it was for fitness, but it doesn't matter what sport you're in, right? If it's boxing or fighting or anything like that, if you don't know how to manage, if your body doesn't know how to manage your muscles, the oxygen development for your muscles require, if you don't train your body to be good at that, where do you think you're going to do 10 rounds? You know what I mean? Where do you think you're going to work for 30 minutes? Your body's got to be used to dealing with oxygen in a restrictive manner for a long period of time. And the only way you do that is short, intense sessions, that you just can't breathe. You spend, like, you go and tell Hayden, are you going to ask Hayden how many times he loved doing the training? You know what I mean? I'm sure that he said that he enjoyed it because of what he was getting from it. But if you went back to the time that we're actually training, most people hate it. I hated it. And it's hard. And that's why if I want to compete in jiu-jitsu in the future, that's why I'll go back to the gym, because like you've got to have a want for that. You've got to have a need for that, because it's hard training. Makes it, like, if you do conditioning properly, it's never easy, and it always makes you want to be sick. You know?
Yeah.
So.
Paul, I want to wrap up now, but I want to ask you to just one last question, and I want you to leave just a single piece of advice. It's a difficult question for you. If you could give a person one single piece of advice that is most valuable going into strongman, to start strongman, what would it be?
I suppose something that I would, it's not just strongman. I would say it's something that I try to put down in all areas of my life. When I'm trying to learn something, when I'm trying to achieve something, is be careful where you get your information from. Try and look for good sources of information, good coaches, people that have been there, done that. Forget the book. Forget it. Like, what they tell you what's supposed to happen in the book, go and find someone with life experience and then go and learn from him. That's generally what I try and do now. You know what I mean? Like, jitsu, got a good coach in jitsu. I can tell by his belt that he's been doing it a long time. I can do by the way he kicks my ass that he's been doing it a long time. He knows how to do it safely. And just some of the basic stuff. You know what I mean? Like, I had Cherry early on. You know what I mean? When I look back to the aspects of my life that I learned most from, at the start there was somebody telling you the basic ins and outs of stuff. So find someone that you can trust, find a good coach. You might have to go around a few people, but ultimately just watch where your information comes from, because that's what's going to help you get down the path or fall off it, if you like it, you know?
That's great advice, Paul.
Thanks.
Paul, thanks so much for coming in. It's been a great insight into strongman, and hopefully have you on again sometime in the future.
No problem at all.
That'd be great.
I don't mind talking about the strongman. It was a part of life. It was quite interesting. You know what I mean? I still look back and think to myself, why did I do it? But it taught me a lot. It taught me a lot, and I left with a body, so I'm left with a half decent body and a half decent neck, and I'm grateful for it. So again, thanks for having me on. It was good to chat to you and answer some of your questions. Hopefully, some of the might lead insight to some of your viewers or listeners. And if you ever need any help getting into shape, if you want to go back in the box, and just you come back down to the asylum, and I'll happily put you through some conditioning rounds, mate. I'll get you fighting fit in no time, and I'll enjoy watching every second of it.
Well, thank you so much, Paul.
No problem at all.
Thank you.
Thanks, Mike.